Greetings and welcome to the Friday, May 21st, 2010 episode of Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer. The acronym for the program is CREE, C-R-E-E, and that is my handle. Today, this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you are in the world, could even be this morning if you're in the UK, it is my great pleasure to have as our guest for 1 hour author Michelle Alexander, who has just been on she's on the speaking tour. She's been on C-SPAN, Democracy Now! I'm not sure if I caught her on NPR, but her book is entitled The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. We haven't gotten a chance to talk about the way the whole system is stacked against black males, particularly as they just maybe happen to be walking to the taco shop.
Yes.
Getting pulled over, their odds of just getting pulled over and asked to provide this, provide that, and then if they happen to be arrested, what are their odds of actually being detained further and charged, and what are their odds of being sent into a diversion program like their white counterpart is likely to be versus actually, being pressured to plea bargain and then do time, all of those things. But once that's happened, it has such a devastating effect, and your book does talk about that, on their families, on their girlfriends, their wives, their children, because now what you have is you're the male that is supposed to be trying to be a father is not around anymore. And you talked. I will just let you talk about that. I think you do it better than me.
Well, you've done it quite well. You're absolutely right. There's so much talk, in the media today about, where are the black fathers, the missing black fathers, the missing black husbands, as though, generations of black men have just kind of opted out of family life for no apparent reason. And what's missing from, this debate and this, public discussion is often the recognition that, black men didn't just walk out on their families voluntarily in most cases. They're often taken away in handcuffs, and locked in cages, years, sometimes decades of their life, and frequently for relatively minor, nonviolent, or drug-related offenses. And then once they're released, they're saddled with criminal records that make it nearly impossible to find employment or housing, contribute meaningfully to a family, and this the destruction of black family in the United States, is highly linked to the emergence of mass incarceration. The odds of a black child being raised by both parents were actually higher during slavery than they are today. And
Can you repeat that?
Yes. The odds of a black child being raised by both parents were higher during slavery than they are today. And that is due in no small part to the mass incarceration of black men and, their inability as a result of being branded felons to contribute meaningfully to a family unit. So, I think that, the discussion of, where have all the black men gone, has just done an incredible disservice to, our public understanding around what really has gone on in the communities hardest hit by mass incarceration. You look at many black colleges today, and in some of them, there's 3 times more black women there than black men. And, people shrug their shoulders about what happened to all the young black men. And, our criminal justice system has, in so many ways, destroyed the potential of generations of young black men. And, again, I really want to emphasize that it's not simply a function of these young men choosing crime. It's not that simple. Barack Obama has admitted to plenty of illegal drug use, lots, in fact. And if Barack Obama had been arrested and treated like a common criminal, if he hadn't been insulated by, being raised in Hawaii and going to, an overwhelmingly white university, if he hadn't been insulated in those ways, if he had been, a young kid in the ghetto doing lots of drugs, what would happen to him? What are the odds that he would be president of the United States today? It's far more likely that he would be cycling in and out of prison, having been branded a felon, and unable to participate meaningfully in the mainstream economy and society. He might even be denied the right to vote, far from being president of the United States. So, I think what's critically important for people to understand is that, all people, especially young people, make mistakes, commit crimes, and only some, though, have been asked to forfeit their lives as a result. And that is the reality for so many young people of color in the United States.
Wow. I was not aware. That's not true. I was aware. I didn't know the statistic, though. I did not know that the United States, as we call it, has an incarceration rate that is 6 to 8 times, is that the correct figure, 6 to 8 times as large as its nearest competitor?
Well, I think Russia may not be quite that many times as compared to Russia, but yes, other Western democracies in general, yes, it is 6 to 8 times higher incarceration rate of most other Western democracies.
Got a hand shot right up, 2 hands, so I guess we'll go, if you're okay with taking calls right now, Ms. Alexander, or we'll go right to this. Okay. 111, I'm showing that your mic is open. You have a question for Ms. Alexander?
Can I be heard?
Yes, you can be heard, sir.
Thank you for taking my call, CREE. I got a question for your guest. After all the information you have gave to the public today, what are the reasons and why do you think white people continue to practice racism and white supremacy?
Well, I think it boils down to kind of what Frederick Douglass once said, that, power seeds nothing without a demand. It never has, it never will. I think that people of every race, not just white folks, but people of every race have difficulty forfeiting their privilege. It is very tempting to try to rationalize whatever privileges or advantages you might have in society and allow yourself to believe that they are deserved. In our society, we tend to think of ourselves as essentially competitors with one another. That is, part of the kind of nature of hyper-capitalism is that, members of a society are encouraged to view each other as competitors and, a scramble for scarce resources, scarce jobs, scarce opportunities. And in a society that, views itself as, a nation of competitors and an environment of scarcity, those who have privilege, who have access to opportunity are going to want to rationalize their advantage and believe that their privileges are justified. And so I think, clearly in the United States, whites, especially white elites, have gone to great lengths to rationalize and justify their privilege and have not shown a willingness to give up their advantages easily.
Okay. Actually, I do have a lot of callers. 213, you had your hand up. You put it down, but now we have 478. 478, I am opening your mic. It is now open. Do you have a question for Ms. Alexander?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I have a question. I did some volunteer work at this, prison here, and I noticed when I went in that a lot. Long story short, there's a lot of people getting paid off of the prison industrial complex, and I wanted to ask you, because as I go in there and I see, the dishwashing companies, the food that's being produced there, on top of everybody who works there. Here, I'm in the South. It is Bell South or AT&T, and I think those calls are over like $1 or $2 a minute just to call collect. A lot of people, and some of the companies are even traded on stock exchanges. So, being that there is a lot of money funneling into the prison industrial complex, how do you, as an attorney, how do you reconcile that if this system does fall, that there's just going to be a lot of people out of work, but at the same time the system was set up. Hold on, because I'm trying to breathe through this thing. The system was still set up to make money off of, these people, but at the same time, if the system falls, there's going to be a lot of people out of work, being that you're an attorney. How do you reconcile that?
Well, you're absolutely right. Prisons have become big business. It's not just private prison companies, which, are now listed on the New York Stock Exchange and are doing quite well in a time of economic recession. But, as you described, it's all the companies that serve prisons as well, phone companies like AT&T, the dishwashing companies, healthcare providers, private healthcare providers, those who make stun guns, and, supply law enforcement, prison guards with, their weaponry. There's just a whole host of corporate interests that benefit from mass incarceration and profit from the caging of human beings. And then, of course, there's the prison guard unions. Prison guard unions are the largest and often most powerful lobbying organizations in many states. And these prison guard unions, they don't just lobby for better pay. What else do they lobby for? They lobby for three strikes laws. They lobby for harsh mandatory sentences because they want to guarantee that there will always be high demand for their job. The way they, achieve job security is ensuring that there will always be a growing number of prisoners, so their services will always be needed. So there, just a whole host of groups and businesses and interests that are invested in not just the maintenance of the system, but its continued expansion. So I think what we have to recognize is that as we build a movement to dismantle mass incarceration, that those who resist, the downsizing of our prison population, they're not going to argue, we need to keep more people in prison so that I can have a good profit margin on my dishwashing business. No, they're not going to make that argument. The prison guard union isn't going to say, we need to keep more people in prison so that I can have a job. No, instead, those groups will lobby for harsh sentences and urge their politicians to stay tough on crime using racially, divisive rhetoric, the racially coded get tough political appeals, and by encouraging the media to seize on, sensational violent crimes as a means of justifying the continued imprisonment of millions of nonviolent and drug-related offenders. So that's the dynamic that we have to deal with. I firmly believe that in the movement that we build to end mass incarceration, we have to, again, overturn the public consciousness that gives rise to that get tough sentiment, but we also have to be willing to do the hard work of movement building for job creation, in poor communities of color as well as in rural white communities that house large prisons. Some of these rural white communities depend on prisons as their source, their economic base, much in the same way that, plantations, served as the economic base for rural communities once upon a time. So this has to be a human rights movement that seeks jobs, employment, health care, in addition to the dismantling of a punitive prison state.
My white friends.
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 And friends of color. Katherine, Massey, Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Gus T, Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Friday, July 3rd. 2026. So I have been told this is our final session, and we get to hit it and quit it. No part two. One audio segment on Lyin, Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. We are picking up on the chapter Obama, the Peril and the Promise. Oh, I'm so thankful that we are wrapping it up. The second worst book that I have ever read. Getting to the audio segment that we heard at the beginning. That is from CREE's 2010 interview with the author, lyin, high yellow wench, Michelle Alexander. Full disclosure, counter-racist evolving engineer, CREE, called into this broadcast when Pam was a guest in 2011, about a year after this interview with Michelle Alexander, to share her view that the cows may promote non-white people engaging in sexual activity with white people as a means to end racism, white supremacy. That may be a conclusion that someone gets, that we are directly, indirectly promoting that notion on this broadcast. I am not sure if she married a white man, talking about CREE, as a result of listening to the context of white supremacy. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm also not sure if the cows is to blame for lyin, high yellow wench Michelle Alexander's white mama sexually sewering a black male. It would seem that is unlikely, if not impossible, but maybe. Victims guaranteed qualified. That's it. Importantly, at the very beginning, CREE did say she heard Michelle Alexander on C-SPAN, Democracy Now! She said, I think I missed her on NPR. She was on NPR. CREE maybe didn't hear that one, but she was on NPR in 2010, in early 2010. This interview was in May 2010. Book had only been out 5 months, and she is already on all those major platforms for this trash. Are you serious? And Amy Goodman, none of these folks looked at this and said, man, these statistics are a little funky. And what you mean white people are victims of racism? What you mean? Anyway. When she gets to that part, talking about Michelle Alexander, saying that Barack Obama was sheltered and he did all these drugs, and there's no way he could have been president if he'd been doing all these drugs and grown up in the ghetto. You mean because he had a white parent like you, he was sheltered? Obama got to grow up with a white mother in Kansas and grandparents in Hawaii, like you got to grow up in Hawaii. It's all the Pacific Ocean, West Coast, right? He got to grow up like you, Ashland. I thought that was so lame. Michelle, again, in my view, that is willfully lying to not disclose that I could be talking about myself. I don't have to point out externally to the world to talk about all this. I could be talking about me. Me and my white friends, if I had 2 black parents, I wouldn't have been in Ashland, and I easily could have been locked up for having friends that jumping off roots, snorting coke. Maybe if you didn't have any white friends, you wouldn't even know anyone doing all that. Wouldn't have access to it. Maybe that. Anyway, that is even one where I said, man, that's what I mean when I say this is a criticism both of Michelle Alexander And all of the non-white people who caped for this trash, it's not even accurate. Did you read this book where Michelle Alexander says that white people are victims of racism? Are you serious? Are you serious? Look here. After Michelle gets that part where she skips over, I got a white parent too, just like Obama, she skips over all that. CREE asks her a question about those statistics comparing the incarceration rate between the so-called U.S. and other parts of the world. Did you hear old, lame, lying, high yellow wench Michelle Alexander get the well, I don't really know if it's 6 to 8 times in comparison to Russia. You know, it's a little different, but I mean, we show enough. I told you these statistics. Is it 32% of the people are in greater confinement because of they are violent offenders, or is it 52%? Is it a third or 52%? Which is it? I said the whole way through the book, it's not even accurate. You're just making up all these numbers, and really, she should have been like, look here, CREE, I don't know. I'm just making up numbers. It's not even that serious. What do you think it is? We'll both pick one. Maybe both of us will be right. Are you serious? We get to the coup de grace. The caller dials in and gets direct on it. Why do you, Michelle Alexander, think white people like your mom, granddad, white people in your family, why do you think white people practice racism, white supremacy? Bang, direct. What does lyin Michelle Alexander say with a white parent? Whoa. Now, I mean, we all got a difficult time giving up our privilege. What? We didn't even ask, why won't white people give up their privilege? We said, why do white people practice racism, white supremacy? That was the question. She didn't even answer the question. Elite white people don't want to give up their privilege. You mean elite white people like your white mother? Like your grandparents? Man, get out of here. And that's another one. Did you read this book? I'm telling you, there is no way that could have been said on this platform at any point in our 7-year history. If I read that book and she said that, oh man, and particularly because I didn't have no regard for this book after having read it. I would not have had a level of respect to say, well, man, I can't ask her no tough questions. This is total slop. Like, what? We get to the last caller who asks, hey, it's profitable running these prisons. Are white people really going to divest? We talk about how much money and the stock exchange and dishwashing. I mean, they make a lot of money. AT&T charge you about $1 billion to call and everything, which is totally true. Old lying, high yellow wench Michelle, she does not. Hey, let me be totally transparent. That's what they say. Hey, we doing some monstrous double dipping. We being Carter Stewart, my husband, he is a federal prosecutor. So, I mean, this household, the Michelle Alexander household, we do profit off of mass incarceration. Big time. Because, I mean, they do lock up niggers in Ohio. For sure. Okay. And we double dip. We got one side. What Fuller say, we take both sides of the mass incarceration argument. We got one side, you lock them niggers in greater confinement, and we don't even talk about, a listener asked, shouldn't Michelle Alexander talk about how her husband participates in all of this? Damn right, now that we got to the end of it. The other part, we double dipping. I write fake outrage full of lies and inaccurate information, misinformation about why we have racist mass incarceration. That is monstrous double dipping in the Michelle Alexander household. And with some minstrelsy and anti-blackness mixed in to boot. Had to get that one in before, because that, I remembered that interview from long ago, and I had been thinking the whole time, like, ugh, I don't even see nothing. Second worst book I've ever read could easily be the worst book I've ever read. I've concluded Michelle wrote this book deliberately to confuse, misinform people classified as black victims of white supremacy. I'm side-eyeing Michelle Alexander. I'm side-eyeing all of the non-white people, white people, earthlings, mammals in general who caped for this trash for, it's been 16 years. Pretend literate, non-literate, semi-literate, illiterate. Katherine Massey Book Club, wrapping it up.
I said, pops, your ass is washed up with all due respect. He said, well, nigga, then show me how it all makes sense. Go figure, motherfucker, every verse is a brick. Your son dope, nigga. Now reap what you sowed, nigga. Please reap what you sowed, nigga. I was born in 87, my granddaddy a legend. Now the same shit that y'all was smoking is my profession. Let's get it.
They must be on the digger. They must be on the digger.
Obama, the promise and the peril. This dynamic poses particular risks for racial justice advocacy during an Obama presidency. On the one hand, the election of Barack Obama to the presidency creates an extraordinary opportunity for those seeking to end the system of mass incarceration in America. Obama's stated positions on criminal justice reform suggest that he is opposed to the war on drugs and the systematic targeting of African Americans for mass incarceration. Shouldn't we trust him, now that he is holding the reins of power to do the right thing? Trust is tempting, especially because Obama himself violated our nation's drug laws and almost certainly knows that his life would not have unfolded as it did if he had been arrested on drug charges and treated like a common criminal. As he wrote in his memoir about his wayward youth, pot had helped, and booze, maybe a little blow when you could afford it. Unlike Bill Clinton, who famously admitted he experimented with marijuana on occasion but didn't inhale, Obama has never minimized his illegal drug use, as he said in a 2006 speech to the American Society of Magazine Editors, "Look, you know, when I was a kid, I inhaled. Frequently. That was the point." Those bad decisions, Obama has acknowledged, could have led him to a personal dead end. Junkie, pothead, that's where I'd have been headed. The final fatal role of the young would-be black man. No doubt, if Obama had been arrested and treated like a common criminal, he could have served years in prison and been labeled a drug felon for life. What are the chances he would have gone to Harvard Law School, much less become President of the United States, if that had happened? It seems reasonable to assume that Obama, who knows a little something about poverty and the temptations of drugs, would have a there but for the grace of God go I attitude about the millions of African and Latino men imprisoned for drug offenses comparable to his own, or saddled for life with felony records. But before we kick back, relax, and wait for racial justice to trickle down, consider this. Obama chose Joe Biden, one of the Senate's most strident drug warriors, as his vice president. The man he picked to serve as his chief of staff in the White House, Rahm Emanuel, was a major proponent of the expansion of the drug war and the slashing of welfare rolls during President Clinton's administration. And the man he tapped to lead the U.S. Department of Justice, the agency that launched and continues to oversee the federal war on drugs, is an African-American former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia who sought to ratchet up the drug war in Washington, D.C., and fought the majority-black D.C. City Council in an effort to impose harsh mandatory minimums for marijuana possession. Moreover, on the campaign trail, Obama took a dramatic step back from an earlier position opposing the death penalty, announcing that he now supports the death penalty for child rapists, even if the victim is not killed. Even though the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the death penalty for non-homicides unconstitutional and international law strongly disfavors the practice. The only countries that share Obama's view are countries like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and China, which allow the death penalty for things like adultery and tax evasion. So why did Obama, on the campaign trail, go out of his way to announce disagreement with a Supreme Court decision ruling the death penalty for child rapists unconstitutional. Clearly, he was attempting to immunize himself from any attempt to portray him as soft on crime, a tactic reminiscent of Bill Clinton's decision to fly back to Arkansas during the 1992 presidential campaign to oversee the execution of a mentally disabled black man. Seasoned activists may respond that all of this is just politics, but as we have seen in earlier chapters, they are the same politics that gave rise to the new Jim Crow. Obama has revived President Clinton's Community-Oriented Policing Services, COPS, program and increased funding for the Byrne Grant program, two of the worst federal drug programs of the Clinton era. These programs, despite their benign names, are responsible for the militarization of policing, SWAT teams, pipeline drug task forces, and the laundry list of drug war horrors described in Chapter 2. Clinton once boasted that the COPS program, which put tens of thousands of officers on the streets, was responsible for the dramatic 15-year drop in violent crime that began in the 1990s. Recent studies, however, have shown that it is not the case. A 2005 report by the Government Accountability Office concluded the program may have contributed to a 1% reduction in crime, at a cost of $8 billion. A peer-reviewed study in the journal Criminology found that the COPS program, despite the hype, had little or no effect on crime. And while Obama's drug czar, former Seattle police chief Gil Kerlikowske, has said the war on drugs should no longer be called a war, Obama's budget for law enforcement is actually worse than the Bush administration's in terms of the ratio of dollars devoted to prevention and drug treatment as opposed to law enforcement. Obama, who is celebrated as evidence of America's triumph over race, is proposing nothing less than revving up the drug war through the same failed policies and programs that have systematically locked young men of color into a permanent racial undercast. The unique and concerning situation racial justice advocates now face is that the very people who are most oppressed by the current caste system, African Americans, may be the least likely to want to challenge it, now that a black family is living in the White House. If Obama were white, there would be no hesitation to remind him of his youthful drug use when arguing that he should end the drug war and make good on his promises to end unjust mandatory minimums. But do African Americans want the media to talk about Obama's drug use? Do African Americans want to pressure Obama on any issue, let alone issues of race? To go one step further, could it be that many African Americans would actually prefer to ignore racial issues during Obama's presidency to help ensure him smooth sailing and a triumphant presidency, no matter how bad things are for African Americans in the meantime? The fact that the last question could plausibly be answered yes raises serious questions for the civil rights community. Have we unwittingly exaggerated the importance of individuals succeeding within pre-existing structures of power, and thereby undermined King's call for a complete restructuring of our society? Have we contributed to the disempowerment and passivity of the black community, not only by letting the lawyers take over, but also by communicating the message that the best path, perhaps the only path, to the promised land is infiltrating elite institutions and seizing power at the top, so racial justice can trickle down? Torres and Guinier suggest the answer to these questions may be yes. They observe that, surprisingly, strategists on both the left and right, despite their differences, converge on the individual as the unit of power. Conservatives challenge the legitimacy of group rights or race consciousness and argue that the best empowerment strategy is entrepreneurship and individual initiative. Civil rights advocates argue that individual group members represent the race and that hierarchies of power that lack diversity are illegitimate. The theory is, when black individuals achieve power for themselves, black people as a group benefit, as does society as a whole. Here we see both liberals and conservatives endorsing the same meta-narrative of American individualism. When individuals get ahead, the group triumphs. When individuals succeed, American democracy prevails. The absence of a thoroughgoing structural critique of the prevailing racial order explains why so many civil rights advocates responded to Barack Obama's election with glee, combined with hasty reminders that we still have a long way to go. The predictable response from the casual observer is, well, how much further? A black man was just elected president. How much further do black people want to go? If a black person can be elected president, can't a black person do just about anything now? All of us or none. At the same time that many civil rights advocates have been pursuing lawyer-driven trickle-down strategies for racial justice, a growing number of formerly incarcerated men and women have been organizing in major cities across the United States, providing assistance to those newly released from prison, and engaging in grassroots political activism in pursuit of basic civil rights. One such organization, based in Oakland, California, is named All of Us or None. The name explicitly challenges a politics that affords inclusion and acceptance for a few, but guarantees exclusion for many. In spirit, it asserts solidarity with the least of these among us. Diversity-driven affirmative action, as described and implemented today, sends a different message. The message is that some of us will gain inclusion. As a policy, it is blind to those who are beyond its reach, the colored faces at the bottom of the well. One policy alone can't save the world, the skeptic might respond. True enough. But what if affirmative action, as it has been framed and debated, does more harm than good, viewed from the perspective of all of us? This brings us to a critical question. Who is the us that civil rights advocates are fighting for? Judging from the plethora of groups that have embarked on their own civil rights campaigns since Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, women, gays, immigrants, Latinos, Asian Americans, the answer seems to be that us includes everyone except white men. This result is not illogical. When Malcolm X condemned the white man and declared him the enemy, he was not, of course, speaking about any particular white man, but rather the white patriarchal order that characterized both slavery and Jim Crow. Malcolm X understood that the United States was created by and for privileged white men. It was white men who dominated politics, controlled the nation's wealth, and wrote the rules by which everyone else was forced to live. No group in the United States can be said to have experienced more privilege and gone to greater lengths to protect it than the white man. Yet the white man, it turns out, has suffered too. The fact that his suffering has been far less extreme and has not been linked to a belief in his inherent inferiority has not made his suffering less real. Civil rights advocates, however, have treated the white man's suffering as largely irrelevant to the pursuit of the promised land. As civil rights lawyers unveiled plans to desegregate public schools, it was poor and working-class whites who were expected to bear the burden of this profound social adjustment, even though many of them were as desperate for upward social mobility and quality education as African Americans. According to the 1950 census, among Southerners in their late 20s, the state-by-state percentages of functional illiterates, people with less than 5 years of schooling, for whites on farms, overlapped with those for blacks in the cities. The majority of Southern whites were better off than Southern blacks, but they were not affluent or well-educated by any means. They were semi-literate, with less than 12 years of schooling. Only a tiny minority of whites were affluent and well-educated. They stood far apart from the rest of the whites and virtually all blacks. What lower-class whites did have was what W.E.B. Du Bois described as the public and psychological wage paid to white workers, who depended on their status and privileges as whites to compensate for low pay and harsh working conditions. As described in Chapter 1, time and time again, poor and working-class whites were persuaded to choose their racial status interests over their common economic interests with blacks, resulting in the emergence of new caste systems that only marginally benefited whites, but were devastating for African Americans. In retrospect, it seems clear that nothing could have been more important in the 1970s and 1980s than finding a way to create a durable, interracial, bottom-up coalition for social and economic justice to ensure that another caste system did not emerge from the ashes of Jim Crow. Priority should have been given to figuring out some way for poor and working-class whites to feel as though they had a stake, some tangible interest in the nascent integrated racial order. As Lonnie Guarnier points out, however, the racial liberalism expressed in the Brown v. Board of Education decision and endorsed by civil rights litigators did not offer poor whites even an elementary framework for understanding what they might gain as a result of integration. Nothing in the opinion or in the subsequent legal strategy made clear that segregation had afforded elites a crucial means of exercising social control over poor and working-class whites as well as blacks. The Southern white elite, whether planters or industrialists, had successfully endeavored to make all whites think in racial rather than class terms, predictably leading whites to experience desegregation, as Derek Bell put it, as a net loss. Given that poor and working-class whites, not white elites, were the ones who had their world rocked by desegregation, it doesn't take a great leap of empathy to see why affirmative action could be experienced as salt in a wound. Du Bois once observed that the psychological wage of whiteness put an indelible black face to failure. Yet, with the advent of affirmative action, suddenly African Americans were leapfrogging over poor and working-class whites on their way to Harvard and Yale and taking jobs in police departments and fire departments that had once been reserved for whites. Civil rights advocates offered no balm for the wound, publicly resisting calls for class-based affirmative action and dismissing claims of unfairness on the grounds that whites had been enjoying racial preferences for hundreds of years. Resentment, frustration, and anger expressed by poor and working-class whites was chalked up to racism, leading to a subterranean discourse about race and to implicitly racial political appeals, but little honest dialogue. Perhaps the time has come to give up the racial bribes and begin an honest conversation about race in America. The topic of the conversation should be how us can come to include all of us. Accomplishing this degree of unity may mean giving up fierce defense of policies and strategies that exacerbate racial tensions and produce, for racially defined groups, primarily psychological or cosmetic racial benefits. Of course, if meaningful progress is to be made, whites must give up their racial bribes too, and be willing to sacrifice their racial privilege. Some might argue that in this game of chicken, whites should make the first move. Whites should demonstrate that their silence in the drug war cannot be bought by tacit assurances that their sons and daughters will not be rounded up en masse and locked away. Whites should prove their commitment to dismantling not only mass incarceration, but all of the structures of racial inequality that guarantee for whites the resilience of white privilege. After all, why should we give up our racial bribes if whites have been unwilling to give up theirs? In light of our nation's racial history, that seems profoundly unfair. But if your strategy for racial justice involves waiting for whites to be fair, history suggests it will be a long wait. It's not that white people are more unjust than others. Rather, it seems that an aspect of human nature is the tendency to cling tightly to one's advantages and privileges and to rationalize the suffering and exclusion of others. This tendency is what led Frederick Douglass to declare that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. So, what is to be demanded in this moment in our nation's racial history? If the answer is more power, more top jobs, more slots in fancy schools for us, a narrow, racially defined us that excludes many, we will continue the same power struggles and can expect to achieve many of the same results. Yes, we may still manage to persuade mainstream voters in the midst of an economic crisis that we have relied too heavily on incarceration, that prisons are too expensive, and that drug use is a public health problem, not a crime. But if the movement that emerges to end mass incarceration does not meaningfully address the racial divisions and resentments that gave rise to mass incarceration, and if it fails to cultivate an ethic of genuine care, compassion, and concern for every human being, of every class, race, and nationality, within our nation's borders, including poor whites, who are often pitted against poor people of color, the collapse of mass incarceration will not mean the death of racial caste in America. Inevitably, a new system of racialized social control will emerge, one that we cannot foresee, just as the current system of mass incarceration was not predicted by anyone 30 years ago. No task is more urgent for racial justice advocates today than ensuring that America's current racial caste system is its last. Given what is at stake at this moment in history, bolder, more inspired action is required than we have seen to date. Piecemeal, top-down policy reform on criminal justice issues, combined with a racial justice discourse that revolves largely around the meaning of Barack Obama's election and post-racialism, will not get us out of our nation's racial quagmire. We must flip the script, taking our cue from the courageous civil rights advocates who brazenly refuse to defend themselves, marching unarmed past white mobs that threaten to kill them. We, too, must be the change we hope to create. If we want to do more than just end mass incarceration, if we want to put an end to the history of racial caste in America, we must lay down our racial bribes, join hands with people of all colors who are not content to wait for change to trickle down, and say to those who would stand in our way, accept all of us or none. That is the basic message that Martin Luther King Jr. aimed to deliver through the Poor People's Movement back in 1968. He argued then that the time had come for racial justice advocates to shift from a civil rights to a human rights paradigm, and that the real work of movement building had only just begun. A human rights approach, he believed, would offer far greater hope for those of us determined to create a thriving, multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy free from racial hierarchy than the civil rights model had provided to date. It would offer a positive vision of what we can strive for, a society in which all human beings of all races are treated with dignity and have the right to food, shelter, health care, education, and security. This expansive vision could open the door to meaningful alliances between poor and working-class people of all colors, who could begin to see their interests as aligned rather than in conflict, no longer in competition for scarce resources in a zero-sum game. A human rights movement, King believed, held revolutionary potential. Speaking at a Southern Christian Leadership Conference staff retreat in May 1967, he told the SCLC staff, who were concerned that the civil rights movement had lost its steam and its direction, "It is necessary for us to realize that we have moved from the era of civil rights to the era of human rights. Political reform efforts were no longer adequate to the task at hand, he said. For the last 12 years, we have been in a reform movement. But after Selma and the Voting Rights Bill, we moved into a new era, which must be an era of revolution. We must see the great distinction between a reform movement and a revolutionary movement. We are called upon to raise certain basic questions about the whole society. More than 40 years later, civil rights advocacy is stuck in a model of advocacy King was determined to leave behind. Rather than challenging the basic structure of society and doing the hard work of movement building, the work to which King was still committed at the end of his life, we have been tempted too often by the opportunity for people of color to be included within the political and economic structure as is, even if it means alienating those who are necessary allies. We have allowed ourselves to be willfully blind to the emergence of a new caste system, a system of social excommunication that has denied millions of African Americans basic human dignity. The significance of this cannot be overstated, for the failure to acknowledge the humanity and dignity of all persons has lurked at the root of every racial caste system. This common thread explains why, in the 1780s, the British Society for the Abolition of Slavery adopted as its official seal a woodcut of a kneeling slave above a banner that read, "Am I not a man and a brother?" That symbol was followed more than 100 years later by signs worn around the necks of black sanitation workers during the Poor People's Campaign, answering the slave's question with the simple statement, "I am a man." The fact that black men could wear the same sign today in protest of the new caste system suggests that the model of civil rights advocacy that has been employed for the past several decades is, as King predicted, inadequate to the task at hand. If we can agree that what is needed now, at this critical juncture, is not more tinkering or tokenism, but as King insisted 40 years ago, a radical restructuring of our society, then perhaps we can also agree that a radical restructuring of our approach to racial justice advocacy is in order as well. All of this is easier said than done, of course. Change in civil rights organizations, like change in society as a whole, will not come easy. Fully committing to a vision of racial justice that includes grassroots, bottom-up advocacy on behalf of all of us will require a major reconsideration of priorities, staffing, strategies, and messages. Egos, competing agendas, career goals, and inertia may get in the way. It may be that traditional civil rights organizations simply cannot or will not change. To this it can only be said, without a hint of disrespect, adapt or die. If Martin Luther King Jr. is right that the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice, a new movement will arise, and if civil rights organizations fail to keep up with the times, they will be pushed to the side as another generation of advocates comes to the fore. Hopefully, the new generation will be led by those who know best the brutality of the new caste system, a group with greater vision, courage, and determination than the old guard can muster, trapped as they may be in an outdated paradigm. This new generation of activists should not disrespect their elders or disparage their contributions or achievements. To the contrary, they should bow their heads in respect, for their forerunners have expended untold hours and made great sacrifices in an elusive quest for justice. But once respects have been paid, they should march right past them, emboldened, as King once said, by the fierce urgency of now. Those of us who hope to be their allies should not be surprised, if and when this day comes, that when those who have been locked up and locked out finally have the chance to speak and truly be heard, what we hear is rage, The rage may frighten us. It may remind us of riots, uprisings, and buildings aflame. We may be tempted to control it or douse it with buckets of doubt, dismay, and disbelief. But we should do no such thing. Instead, when a young man who was born in the ghetto and who knows little of life beyond the walls of his prison cell and the invisible cage that has become his life turns to us in bewilderment and rage, we should do nothing more than look him in the eye and tell him the truth. We should tell him the same truth that the great African-American writer James Baldwin told his nephew in a letter published in 1962. In one of the most extraordinary books ever written, The Fire Next Time. With great passion and searing conviction, Baldwin had this to say to his young nephew. This is the crime of which I accuse my country and my countrymen, and for which neither I nor time nor history will ever forgive them, that they have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives, and do not know it, and do not want to know it. It is their innocence which constitutes the crime. This innocent country set you down in a ghetto in which, in fact, it intended that you should perish. The limits of your ambition were, thus, expected to be set forever. You were born into a society which spelled out with brutal clarity, and in as many ways as possible, that you were a worthless human being. You were not expected to aspire to excellence. You were expected to make peace with mediocrity. You have, and many of us have, defeated this intention. And by a terrible law, a terrible paradox, those innocents who believed that your imprisonment made them safe are losing their grasp on reality. But these men are your brothers, your lost younger brothers. And if the word integration means anything, this is what it means, that we, with love, shall force our brothers to see themselves as they are, to cease fleeing from reality and begin to change it. For this is your home, my friend. Do not be driven from it. Great men have done great things here, and will again, and we can make America what it must become. It will be hard, but you come from sturdy peasant stock, men who picked cotton and dammed rivers and built railroads, and in the teeth of the most terrifying odds, achieved an unassailable and monumental dignity. You come from a long line of great poets since Homer. One of them said, "The very time I thought I was lost, my dungeon shook and my chains fell off." We cannot be free until they are free. God bless you, and Godspeed.
The end. You've been listening to The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander, narrated by Karen Chilton, and directed by Drew Sussman.
Which black people love illusions. We love to make up stuff and then try to ride on it, and to go further than that, tell the whole world, and we are the ones who practically invented this term. We're all about keeping it real. Man, we don't like nothing phony. We like to keep it real. Anything phony, get it away from me. That's what we tell the world. And we the phoniest people on earth. Because we pretend that we know stuff that we don't know. That's why we fill up the jails and all like that. The only smart people who are in greater confinement are those who plan to be there. That's not everybody. I mean, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, all these people have some smarts. Because when they went to jail, they planned to be there. Fred Shuttlesworth, he planned to be there. Andrew Young, he's been arrested in quote-unquote civil rights demonstrations. Planned to be there. Martin Luther King went to the Birmingham jail. He planned to be there. That was part of the plan. We're going down there and get arrested. In the movie Gandhi, I mean, they had that scene. I mean, they showed, well, I'll let you go for 100 rupees. See, I refuse to pay 100 rupees. He said, oh, you prefer to go to jail? He said, as you wish. Gandhi could have gotten 100 rupees right quick from that crowd that was out there. It was on the verge of rioting. If he had just stepped out and say, well, I can get out of here if you all, pass the hat and get 100 rupees. They could have gotten it in about 5 minutes, even back then, and when everybody was down and out. But all those people out there, one of them put in whatever was equivalent of a couple of pennies. It would have added up. But he said, I refuse to pay 100 rupees. To stay out of jail? No, I'm not going to pay you nothing. Not going to give you nothing, not 1 rupee. You say, well, in other words, you wish to go to jail? He said, as you wish. And then the magistrate didn't know what to do then, so he says, well, I'll let you go on your own recognizance until we set a date for your trial. He walked out of there. But he was ready to go. Smart move. Because one thing, all them people was out there, if the magistrate had let him go to jail, it might have been a riot right there in that little village. And there wasn't enough soldiers on hand. And the British knew that. It wouldn't be able to contain it. So there was strategy. But now black people in general, in the Northwestern Hemisphere, we go to jail for all this stuff. I mean, robbing other black people and murder. Sitting up behind the bars and claim that we are smart. So I just flat out make that statement. The only smart black people behind bars anywhere. That would include me if I wound up arrested. The only smart people who are behind bars are those who plan to be there. And if I get arrested and I didn't plan to be there, it means I'm not smart. Because I didn't outsmart whoever put me in there. That's what that means. That's exactly what that means. Now, if I planned to be there, then that was a move on my part. But if I didn't plan to be there, somebody else outsmarted me. And that's a word that needs to be passed around because a whole lot of black people doing 40 and 50 years claim that they are smart, sitting around the cell block talking about how smart they are. You're so smart, what are you doing in here? That's a logical question. Do you want to be in here? No, I don't want to be in here. Yet you claim that you're smart. Yeah, I'm smart. But if you're so smart, how come you're in here? That's why the code says the first thing black people, particularly nowadays where the plan is to put them in jail, is the plan not to be in jail. when they drop out of that 9th grade, to say, well, now I got one plan that I know is going to work because I have planned this. I ain't going to jail. I might go a lot of places, but I am not going to jail because I got a plan for not going to jail. How many black people can say that with conviction? Hardly any. Particularly those who are out here deliberately doing things that usually lead to a jail. There ain't no example of nothing. Certainly not nobody to listen to. I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing this. Well, okay. You're doing this according to your plan and whatnot. Yeah, I'm planning on doing this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do this. Well, all those things that you're planning on doing are registered as big time illegal. Yeah, but I'm planning on doing this and planning on. Well, do you have a plan for staying out of jail? No. Well, that's the first thing you should have planned before you made your other plans, if you're going to be doing all that illegal stuff. First plan is how you're going to stay out of jail when you get caught. Or how you're going to stay out of jail by nobody knowing that you're doing it. Who can pin it on you?
Had to run from 2 cops for 2 blocks, it's too hot. Hand on my 22, listening to Tupac. I'm now a 2-time felon, 2 thorough, 2 llamas. Had to quit my ex-girl cause she was a 2-timer. 2 in your lower body, 2 in your upper. 1 time a lollipop, 2 times a sucker.
Katherine Massey Book Club. The 2-time felons and Gus T. Just want to say that Michelle and her 2 best white friends are all 2-time suckers, 2-time high yellow wenches, and you have the 2nd worst book of all time. Absolutely repulsive. And I'm going to tell you, it is only because there are 1,000 pages of FBI files. That is the only reason this is not the worst book of all time. It easily could be. Easily. If Dorothy Roberts had not written The Mixed Marriage Project, this would be the worst book of all time. And if I find out at any point Michelle Alexander is some FBI files, she informant, William O'Neill, that type of thing with Michelle Alexander or Carter Stewart. There can be anybody in the family. If I find any FBI files or anything like that with these 2, option to revisit. Maybe we have a reseeding for the worst book of all time if there's some think element in all of this, which is possible, I reckon. I mean, hey, her husband works for the feds, so how much of a stretch would that be? Any hoodles, Katherine Massey Book Club, I am so thankful. I do not remember the last time we read a book where I have been so thankful it is done. Like what comes to mind immediately, The Man in the High Castle. But that was for different purposes. I'd have to think for a minute, like Wretched of the Earth? Something where Jesus Christ, when is it going to be? Can we finish? Can we wrap it? Wrap it. That was not applause. Hey, shut up, Michelle. Did you? Ooh, we could talk. If folks have concluding thoughts, if you need the cape for Michelle, if you were one of the black people, you read this book and thought Michelle is awesome and this is amazing and this has really reframed how I think about racism in the world, bring your retarded, non-literate, pretend literate, semi-literate, illiterate hind parts, 720 716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. It's right there on my tongue. This is the worst book I've ever read. This is the worst book I've ever. And then it's like, oh yeah, it's 1,000 pages. I think the Mixed Marriage Project, that is equally bad. Those 1,000 pages, like, woo, man, that is the separate. I mean, it's 1,000+ pages of FBI files attached to that book. Once I have that verified, like, yeah, there would have to be some sort of government element that this was deliberate and like this was an assignment. You go out there and confuse them niggers. Now, even I'm going to concede, I said, particularly after the conclusion that we just had to sit through, force feeding it felt like, I think Michelle Alexander deliberately wrote this book to confuse non-white people. I think that was the goal, and she was successful. There's no other logical conclusion I can come to. Hey, if you think Michelle Alexander is retarded, I'll retract and I'll just say that, like, oh, she's retarded. She did hey, right on. She did the best she could, and we just won't read that one. That's great effort. Right. Good job. You give her participation award type thing. But people don't say she's retarded. They say she is an amazing scholar and a genius, and she's brilliant, and she's the most informed person about racism. All of that is a lie. This book is a lie. It is a disgraceful anti-black minstrel performance of a lie, and I can only conclude. I told you I was why am I playing Hit 'Em Up in the background? Oh, that's right. I said brass knucks the whole way through, and I mean every single person classified as black. I mean every single person classified as not white. If you read this book and you didn't, wow, something is up. I need to do something. You walked away thinking, wow, this is intelligent and amazing and so smart. Woo! We are retarded. You heard my pronoun? We are retarded. When they say reading comprehension is an F, there you go. There's your illustration. Anytime we talk about reading comprehension, and in fact, when people say that black people are smart about racism, I'm just going to say this book. If you are really smart about racism, you would quickly, hey, I told you, this is a book you can judge by the title. The cover, literally, because the title is on the cover. Hey, you can break the adage a few times. Colorblindness? You think John Burge has a vision problem that results in him attacking the genitals of black males. He needs a good optometrist, and then he will leave Negro penises alone. That's what this is? That's what we're going to talk about. Oh, boy. Negro. That's one thing I wish I had read this book earlier, because I would have been insulting black people a long time ago. Like, maybe I needed 17 years of research to really dig in on this and be like, wow, this is going to be a double dig on Michelle and on the black people who caped for this book, because there are so many of you, cows listeners included. We are retarded. What did he say? Worthy of great pity. That's true. We are retarded. That's true. Whitey got us. Again. That's true. Big time on this one. Apparently, that happens a lot, where white people write books that are totally false about racism, and they trick all of us. The Mixed Marriage Project, illustration number 2. 1,000 pages of FBI files. That's another one. I could even pop my chest on that one. Apparently, Gus T was the only person who thought this book is the worst thing I've ever read, and I think Dorothy Roberts is a liar. At least that's another one, unless you think Dorothy Roberts is retarded also, and she should have been the first person. Are there some FBI files here that I should be filing? Should have restarted the Tupac so I could be cold-blooded the whole way through. But yes, talking to you, anybody, you read this book the first time through, 2010 version that we read, and you thought, Michelle is retarded. F for reading comprehension and an F for your understanding of white supremacy racism, what it is, how it works, and it would be an easy one. Colorblind? You didn't pause? Colorblind? Her saying that affirmative action is a bribe for the niggers. Keeping it Tupac, man, I feel like punching her in the face and y'all in the face. But victims, Fuller say, hey, don't be, hey, and even that clip from Fuller talking about, that was the most beautiful thing to hear out of all the slop and repulsiveness and nauseating verbiage that we heard from old Michelle today. Lyin, Shell. Man, Fuller, when he said all the reasons that black people go to jail, did you hear what he said? He said, robbing other black people, murder. Those would be violent crimes. He didn't say puff, pass, smoking the old reefer. He didn't say opioids. Fuller was here for the opioid crisis. He didn't say that. He didn't say fentanyl. He didn't say crack. He was here for the crack babies and all that. He didn't say that. He said things we go to jail for, robbing other black people. This is a black person who lived in Washington, D.C. before it got racially dislocated. Lots more people classified as white. He said robbing other black people, and Mr. Fuller talked about being a victim of a robbery, armed robbery in Washington, D.C. by other black people. He said robbery, murder, violent crimes. He didn't say nothing about no drugs. That's what we go to jail for, is doing drugs here in the nation's capital, where they now do have recreational cannabis and more white people. Neely Fuller Jr. ProduceJustice.com. Isn't this book repulsive? Oh, it's the worst thing I've ever read in the world. There are many, and even I have to say this before we get to the folk. This book is so bad. If it wasn't for Dorothy Roberts' Mixed Marriage Project, this would be the worst book I've ever read, probably by a good mile. Not even close. Way worse than anything else I've ever read, except Dorothy Roberts. But this book does not even really warrant like a Scott. That's why I keep calling her retarded. If anybody's like, wow, I'm offended. Why are you speaking that way? Why don't you be more? This book doesn't even warrant a professional response. It's so bad and so sloppy and so anti-black. I could go on, but I'm going to just stop right there. All of the rest of it, unprofessional and all the rest of it, it doesn't warrant. Let me come in and be scholarly and Mrs. Alexander published in 2000. No, you are a hot lion, high yellow wench. That's about the size of it. Like, that is about what it's worth. That's the way that you talked about black people directly, indirectly. Oh, you are a lion, high yellow wench. I'm going to say the same thing I said before. You better have security. If I ever see you, you, Carter Stewart, your lame biracial children, any of the folks who cape for you, oh my God, any of you lame SOBs that have a problem, upset Michelle, my black sister, my biracial sister, Cowbell, bring your hind parts for life. I said you're retarded. I said you pick one. Pretend literate, non-literate, illiterate, semi-literate. You pick one. You could say, I didn't read it. I didn't even see all that foolishness about the racial bribe and affirmative action. And I didn't even know she didn't. I don't even know who John Burge is, Brother Gus. You could say that to me. That's okay. We are worthy of great pity. But Don't you tell me you read this book and you thought this is number. What I say? What's my 3? Fuller says, follow the logic. I say, strive for accuracy. You all have the audacity to check me every 5 seconds, even when I'm correct. You ain't right. You ain't right. I know you said 2 + 2 is 4, but I think you messed that up somewhere. If that's the way you're going to talk to me, then damn it, you all should have seen Michelle doesn't know what the F she is talking about. And if you think otherwise, let me say it again. You read this book and thought it was constructive. You thought the A word, you thought it was accurate. Constructive is subjective. Accurate is not. You read this and thought it was accurate. Let me say it again slow. You're retarded. You do not understand racism, white supremacy, semi-literate, non-literate, pretend literate, illiterate, and lots of us in that category. That ain't nothing to be. Am I saying something shocking? How many of you all don't read? All right then, I'm not even worthy of great pity. Ain't that what Fuller say? This is the illiterate. Now from now on, we say worthy of great pity. Woo-hoo! Michelle Alexander. Black people don't understand racism, white supremacy. Woo-hoo! Michelle Alexander. That's probably what white, it might have even been an experiment. Jim Jones, real talk. Let's throw it out there and see how they respond. They thought it's great. Wow. Or let's see, how long does it take us to convince them that this is great? Anyway, if you thought it was grand and all the rest of it, I'm doing, what is it, Neo from the Matrix? I got my fingers out. Both, really. I got my finger up because I had to sit through this for 12 weeks. And I got my fingers out. Bring your hind parts for eternity. I forgot to read an email from last week. My bad. I do appreciate the folks who wrote in. Email from last week that I neglected to read. I'm looking forward to the end of this book. Me too. It's a false equivalent to treat public prisons as one thing and private prisons as another when both are funded by the public purse and both rely on private profit. A company that receives 90 to 100% of its revenue from the government contracts depends on incarceration levels, lobbies for punitive policies, operates under state authority. This is not a private company in any meaningful sense. So-called public prisons rely on private companies for health care, food, telecommunications, AT&T, surveillance, construction, and probation services, all funded by the public purse. Treating public and private prisons as fundamentally different masks the fact that both operate through public money and private profit extraction. Mrs. Alexander is adept at stealing and bastardizing other people's ideas and, like her white mother, I'm sure has no shame in her game. For example, in her non-strategy, she recommends data collection as a tool to assess the impact of police enforcement, which was not a new concept in 2010, nor impact assessments. Adding to the temptation to avoid race is the fact that opportunities for challenging mass incarceration on purely race-neutral grounds have never been greater. With budgets busting, more than 24 states have reduced or eliminated harsh mandatory minimum sentences, restored early release programs, and offered treatment instead of incarceration for some drug offenders. Has Miss Alexander identified white people's role in the system of white supremacy anywhere in this book? I would say no. Mostly the title, again, like I said, sometimes you can break the rule. Age of Colorblindness. Now that's telling you right there. With white people, it's they're ignorant, they're unconscious, they're unwitting, they're well-meaning, almost like they might just be accidentally read, tragically ignorant. We got that one. Yeah, and they're victims too, like her white mom. See, Mostly she has spent her time scolding and finger wagging Bill Cosby and rappers like Pusha T, K. Kendrick Lamar, black people sagging britches. Mostly she has been the Congressional Black Caucus, NAACP. Mostly she has spent her time scolding Barack Obama, who does have a white parent like she. Mostly she has spent her time and has gotten most aggressive, put some bass in her voice to scold people classified as black and or people associated with black like Barack Obama. I have not heard her get rowdy and aggressive like that with white people. I guess you could say she pointed out Bill Clinton a few times and Joe Biden, their super predator bills, the 1990s. I guess you could point out that. But really beyond that, most of her might and scold is for black people. That's my view from the book. Let's see. Well, now, folks who dialed in, if you have commentary as we, thank God, wrap it up. The number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I can put my middle finger down for 1 second and do the watermelon shimmy, even though it is a little windy. The temperature did creep above 70 degrees Fahrenheit today in Seattle. It has not been above 70 degrees here in over a week. It has been super duper cold in the 50s every day. I think some days we barely have creeped above 60 degrees. This is really the first day that the sun has been out for a sustained amount of time in over a week. I'm saying this just because I know in many other parts of the world right now, including the U.S., they've been having massive heat waves, and it's been a really dangerous, threatening experience and health problem and all the rest of it. Hope people are staying hydrated. It has been the total opposite here in Seattle. Today is like the first time, I think, in the last week or so where, whoa, I think I can take my winter jacket off. Wow. Man. Summer 2026 in Seattle. But I'm thankful today we did just a teaspoon get over 70 degrees. Whew. It's celebration to get rid of old lyin Michelle Alexander. Let's see. Folks who dialed in, if you have a hand up commentary to share, our caller 5962. Line should be open. Concluding thoughts on the text, sir.
Yes, sir. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Concluding thoughts. She really does not like that Obama character much at all. We're right back at this is all Obama's fault from the beginning, where she said that the new Jim Crow may have not even gotten off the ground had it not been for Obama revitalizing the programs that helped fund and put black people in jail in great numbers. And we're right back to blaming him again. This time, not only are we blaming him, but a potential junkie and crackhead president who somehow skipped out on all of this because of his privilege. The next thing I got is then right after she gets done bashing Obama, she bashes us because do African Americans want to pressure Obama on any issue, let alone issues of race? So this new Jim Crow system is somehow our fault because we got complacent once black president got into office, and we just got complacent on all the other issues that we were having, from what I took out of that section. And then we got to get back to coddling white people, because the white man, it turns out, has suffered as well. I'm not entirely sure what she's speaking of, and I know just reading another book alongside this, when we're talking about the white people who, were thought of going to have to bear the brunt of the burden when it comes to having to fund schools as taxpayers for black people to go to school, to black kids to go to school. There's a lot of books that just interrogate that white people mobilized. They did everything they could to try to keep that out. They weren't submissive in that idea where they were just going to allow their tax dollars to be taken to be able to pay for black kids to go to school. And then, right back to racial bribes. Again, I'm not aware of any bribes that white people have to practice in to continue the system of racism, white supremacy. It's all working in fashion of how it's supposed to. And then, final thoughts. Again, I read this book in 2016, and I can definitely say I wasn't anywhere near scholarly, and I wouldn't say I am now. I'm still learning. But I at least am able to interrogate and say, wait a minute, I've read something, I've seen something that would contradict that affirmative action has favorably helped black people, or that I've read something or understood something that there is no racial bribe for black people, as in if we don't like something that's going on, we can just say, hey, that's racist, and then it'll get fixed. If that was the case, I think black people in unison would always be claiming something is racist if that was going to fix or solve the issue. And that's all I got.
Much obliged, sir. I don't know. Michelle might take offense. Like, wait a minute now. I didn't say Obama was no crackhead. Just said he was doing a little cocaine. That's not the same thing as crack. I think that's way more accurate than she was in the book. But the bribe, the bribe is. There's so many things that would have stood out to me, even the first time around when I was a lot more confused. But the affirmative action as well, that being a bribe, and then her not including that white people are the ones who've really cleaned up on affirmative action. Those are things that would really, logic would have been breaking down big time on that one. But either or. Much obliged for the commentary, sustained commentary, sir. Hopefully worthy of your time and energy. She did do a lot of bashing, both of Obama and then black people in general, and that the component about black people, are we not responding to, or not say, hey, you got this junkie crackhead in the White House, and why don't you do something? Like, I do not see any evidence at all, and I don't remember her having any data to back this. I saw no evidence at the time that this book was published in 2010, nor during his 2 terms in office, that black people classified as black born in this part of the world or elsewhere, were unwilling to criticize President Obama, and specifically unwilling to criticize him as a result of what he did or did not do with regards to black people. I saw a ton, I would even say, pause on all of that. This book was published in 2010. As I said before, generally speaking, that would mean she probably would have had to wrap up the writing for this, maybe even as early as late 2008. Maybe she could have, crept into the early part of 2009, but probably not like June, May, probably nothing that late. Like, she would have had to go ahead and get this, final draft and everything, because they're going to do a major release and a big book tour and all that stuff and have it ready to go to press by January. She probably would have had to wrap this up pretty early in June. So she really would not, he didn't get into office until late January? She really only got to see literally a few weeks, a few days of President Obama in office to even make an assessment. Are black people, who knows? Black people, he hadn't even got there to see, number one, to see what is he going to do, what is he going to say as it relates to racism and black people, and then how are black people going to respond? She didn't even have a year. She probably didn't even have 6 months to make an assessment before she's making these sweeping claims and black people are lazy and you're not willing to call them out. Like, again, we are not reading the 20th anniversary edition where she's kind of looking back on all of this retrospectively. We're not. And I can even show you there was only one added paragraph. So it's not like she went back and made an assessment and added pages and pages after his, presidency ended to now, okay, let's look at maybe even redact some of these criticisms because, man, there were black people. I'm not going to call names here. There were C.O.W.S listeners, published authors, pundits classified as black. That was an entire industry complaining about President Obama and what he did or did not do as it relates to black people all the way through. My brother's keeper, it didn't do enough. It should have included black females and all the gripes and complaints that people had there. C.O.W.S, man, you can go back in the C.O.W.S archive from we were on there. We got back on the air right when Obama was in the White House. So we were there simultaneous, no interruptions, through and through, all the way through. So you can hear Mr. Fuller talking about the Obama presidency, both terms, Dr. Welsing, both terms, lots of black people, Dr. Cambon, callers, guests, talking about all Trayvon Martin when that happened, all the big time events of his presidency. You can hear. I do not remember. If anything, let's stop calling names. Let's not. We are in a system of white supremacy. Who is in charge? I remember lots and lots of conversations about that. Mr. Fuller having to remind us, Dr. Welsing having to remind us, even Minister Farrakhan, his wife passing away this week, Khadijah Farrakhan. Minister Farrakhan says, hey, it is called the White House for a reason. He was reminding us that either Obeezy might be there. It's the White House. He has a boss. That's what Fuller says. He has a boss. So I don't even think that's why I said I think her mission was to deceive black people, maybe all non-white people, but specifically black people, to deceive us about what it means to be classified as white. That's why we got all this white victimhood and all the rest of it. And then to confuse us about racism, white supremacy. Thus the title, In an Age of Colorblindness. John Burge he needs to get a vision appointment and then he will leave Negro testicles alone. We're going to talk about that on Monday, old John Burge and the Negro testicles and New Jim Crow. Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. So don't have too much of the mad dog for the 4th of July weekend. Don't get too close to the firecrackers. I already saw where some white people burned down apparently multiple houses with them firecrackers. I was just going to say keep all your fingers, toes, and your residence. We don't have nothing to celebrate in a system of white supremacy racism. But we'll be here tomorrow, Counter Racist Weekly Review, and then Monday we'll talk about Chicago, the system of white supremacy, John Burge, and them Negro testicles.
Can I add one more thing, Gus?
What's that, Consir?
Yes, sir. The last thing I remembered about where she's bashing Obama, she really turns around to blame it on us for appointing him, getting him in office, and then he didn't do anything but go add Joe Biden to his administration, who expanded the crime bill, and doesn't mention that her husband was appointed by Obama, and he might get a little bit of locking up black bodies federally. So that's the only other thing I had.
Double dipping. Yeah, that is important. So I forgot who that was. I don't know if that was victim in New Jersey. Some say, you said your memory is exemplary. It is. I'm remembering. It was said by a caller. You can say, you should have remembered the exact caller. True. My bad. But I do remember someone asked, or maybe even wrote in, should she have included, oh, hey, since she mentioned her husband, Carter Stewart, and I said, hey, you too bring your hind parts, you double dipper. Because we talked about, she mentioned him in the book, and she mentioned specifically, hey, Carter said he ain't even down with New Jim Crow. If you don't like the book, he ain't with it. And we speculated as to why that is. Like, dang, hey, it might be, hey, look here. I don't care nothing about no old Jim, new Jim, Crim Crow, whatever Crow. I'm a prosecutor. This here house, this mortgage, when you were sitting around birthing children, playing on the stove, writing your goofy book that's not even accurate. Remember, I went to Stanford too. I can read. 32%, 52%. You don't know. I can read. While you over here playing around with your goofy Crow books, I pay the bills in the house. Now we got this bestseller. Hey, right on. I guess do what you do. But still, he didn't know he was going to do all this maybe. He said, hey, you got to sit around and be a housewife, high yellow wench, and write this old goofy book. I pay the bills. I'm a federal prosecutor. I cage Negroes in Ohio. Go Buckeyes. Matter of fact, I'm so retarded. You know what? I asked the bot. I said, look here. Did Carter Stewart, did he participate in the incarceration, greater confinement of Maurice Clarett? For people who follow the Ohio State football, Maurice Clarett, he was a black male, privileged, the most privileged you could be in Ohio State. He played football. He won a national championship on one of the early 2000s college football teams. And then they found out that he had participated in some illegal activities, I think either gambling or selling material. I don't remember what it was, but it was something. He was doing things that he was not supposed to do connected with college football, either tickets, selling materials, or something. Anyway, he ended up being prosecuted and having to go to prison, ruined his whole career basically. He had substance abuse problems, all of that. Anyway, I asked if Carter Stewart was involved in his incarceration, and even data that this would reinforce what we talked about. Most of the people who get locked up, they are in state prison. Maurice Clarett was not federally charged. He was charged in state prison, unless I've been misinformed. But either way, Carter Stewart was not involved. But Maurice Clarett and Michelle Alexander's husband, Carter Stewart, they went out on a talking circuit about the rehabilitation once you've been locked up and branded a felon and a convict and all this old that you got to check the box. They go around and do this old rehabilitation circuit where, again, more money, more money, more money. And again, it's the double dipping. I get money on the locking these Negroes up and being a prosecutor so my wife can sit at home and write goofy books to confuse black people. And we both go out on the, oh man, we done locked up old Maurice, but he got his act together and he's not a no-count Negro anymore. Go tell him how prison did you right, Maurice. You rehabilitated Negro now. Tell him. They got our check. Wait a minute, we got our check? Okay, yeah. Go ahead and tell him, Maurice. Go ahead and tell him, Maurice. Double dipping. Someone, that was a grand. I said at the time, I don't know. I have to think about it. But at the time, I said she brought him up. That's why I played that segment of him talking. She brought him up. Yes, she should have included that. What is his role? Is that it? He goes out and does speaking engagements with Maurice Clarett? Gives goofy talks and reviews about the children, the multiracial children. They didn't like the movie Race. Didn't say nothing about at all, but they didn't like the movie Race. Much obliged for the addendum, caller. Let's see. We'll nab email number 2. Greetings, Gus, listeners and callers. Obama, the promise and the peril. Trust is tempting, especially because Obama himself violated our nation's drug laws, almost certainly knows that his life would not have unfolded as it did if he had been around. And even I have to pause right there. You lying high, and that's again, why are you name calling her? Why have you been saying she's retarded? Because I have the same contempt that I gleaned from reading this book that she has towards black people, and even beyond the book, where she comes and gives that old lame story that our caller shared with us about the black male with the potted plant dirty potted plant that he stole from his grandma's back porch. And some people thought that she lied right there too. But the same consistent contempt that she shows for black people throughout her life, even her children, I don't want no Jesse, all this black and that same contempt, I'm throwing it right back for the second worst book I've ever read. And nothing is more contemptuous then you're willfully deceiving victims of racism. That is way worse than me calling her retarded all day long, me calling her a high yellow wench. She wrote this book to confuse us. We are already at the back of the bus being killed. John Burge is anally raping and sodomizing black males in your native Chicago. You can't say a mumbling word about that, but I'm going to take that old Obama to task. Get out of here, you lying, high, yellow wench. And what I was right with it, I don't need to hear your analysis of Obama. He hadn't even been in office long enough for you to say anything. If you want to talk about, some non-white person who is so-called privileged and they didn't get raised in the Negro environments where they would have been locked up for snorting cocaine, Michelle told us, my white friends, they were snorting, maybe she snorting yayo, ain't that what she said? Jumped off the roof. We don't need you talking about, and that's what I say all the time. That's what I say to y'all. That's what we do. That's what we do. That's our contempt for black people. When we get to going out here, and I want to point out flaws and black people who not doing the correct thing in the system of white supremacy, don't you write your lame piece of crap book and have the audacity to talk bad about all the black people that she, really all of us, because she said, you lame niggers, you're going to let Obama off the hook and not even say, she didn't even give us a chance. She didn't even give us a chance to see if that was going to be true or not. And she didn't revise it once she saw that's not even true. Black people went to, you didn't hear Cornel West talk about Obama every day for 8 years? You didn't talk about Obama every day for 8 years? She didn't even revise it. She didn't even give an extra sentence. I guess some black people were a little bit critical of Obama and were disappointed that he didn't do. But man, for Tamir Rice, you lying high yellow wench, Tamir Rice's mother, she came out and said, man, I wish Obama could do more. You lying high yellow wench. That's why I got her picture on the $500 bill. All that double to make money to write a book and lie and make all this money where white people helped you. We will pay you. We'll put you on NPR. You heard CREE. We'll put you on C-SPAN, Democracy Now, NPR, all the podcasts you want, Martha's Vineyard. Give you awards. We'll make sure. We'll give the book away for free. Put it in every library. Put it on the syllabus. Make them read it at the schools. Come on. They didn't even do all that for medical apartheid. They giving away free copies of medical apartheid? I'd like one. They do that? Back to email number 2. Obeezers. His life would not have unfolded as it did, nor Michelle's, if they had been arrested on drug charges and treated like common criminals. As he wrote in his memoir about his wayward youth, pot had helped, and booze and maybe a little blow when you could afford it. More anti-blackness. This is the reader's commentary. Any admitted illicit drug usage by Obama is not going to be treated the same by white media. Black people know that any drug use by Obama would not be looked upon the same as white people. More victim blaming of black people. Was not George Bush Jr. implicated on using cocaine? He never received the same interrogation by the white media. JFK traveled with a suitcase of pharmaceuticals, including narcotics, when he was actually president, not as a young man. None of this was revealed until many decades after his death. George Bush Cocaine Chronicles. 2. Torres and Guinier suggest the answer to these questions may be yes. They observe that surprisingly, strategists on both the left and the right, despite their differences, converge on the individual as the unit of power. When they say left and right, are these black people or white people? I have no idea. Any discussion about power has to be primarily about white people, is my thought. I would agree. 3. The absence of a thoroughgoing structural critique of prevailing racial order explains why so many civil rights advocates respond to Barack Obama's election with glee. Here, I think she is talking about black people, although certainly there are individuals classified as white who would say that they are so-called civil rights advocates, but I think this might be a synonym, at least colloquially, to her book for black people. I could be wrong. And black people exclusively. I don't even mean non-white people in total, just people classified as black. So-called civil rights advocates, many of them responded to Barack Obama's election with glee, combined with hasty reminders that we still have a long way to go. The predictable response from the casual observer is, well, how much further? A black man with a white parent like our author was just elected president. How much further do black people want to go? If a black person can be elected president, can't a black person do just about anything now? She seems to have a real disdain for black people. That's what I've said over and over and over. It comes through so clearly in this book, her contempt for it. How could you not have she grew up in Ashland, Oregon. Lived in Stell, Illinois. So there it was 0% black people. Ashland, Oregon is 0.5% black people. She went to Stanford. That is Dr. William Shockley. We all know Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. And that is Eugenics University. That's what Dr. William Shockley, Eugenics University. And then she married a federal prosecutor, which you do. I lock, cage up Negroes. I'm sure he locks up some white people too, but hey, I'm a federal prosecutor. System of white supremacy racism. But it comes in, I have a white parent. The contempt for black people. Even when you get asked the direct question, why do white people practice racism? Says, hey. Now we all guard our privilege. What? That right there. That right there is contempt for black people. She criticizes civil rights advocates, coded language for black people, that same thing I said, echo, initially, and then parrots the tropes of suspected racists at the end of the paragraph. All of us or none of us. Diversity-driven affirmative action. The message is that some of us will gain inclusion as a policy. It is blind. That's why I played Ray Charles, and I wanted her to get the heck on out of here, to blind to those who are beyond its reach. The colored faces at the bottom of the well. That's Derek Bell, that she doesn't even reference him. Who is the us that civil rights advocates are fighting for? The answer seems to be that us includes everyone except white men. Yet the white man, it turns out, has suffered too. Civil rights advocates, however, have treated the white man's suffering as largely irrelevant to the pursuit of the promised land. As civil rights lawyers unveiled plans to desegregate public schools, it was poor and working class whites who were expected to bear the burden, given that poor and working class whites, not white elites, were the ones who had their world rocked by desegregation. It does not take a great leap of empathy to see why affirmative action could be experienced as salt in the wound. Metaphor, and again, now you can call this, you can pick, but you only get two options from Gus T. If you think there are other options, that's you, but in my view, there would only be two options. So, option one, Michelle Alexander, a Stanford grad and a professor at The Ohio State, is retarded. She doesn't know that affirmative action mostly benefited white people. She doesn't know this. Option two, she's aware of this, and she is deliberately not telling us this to inform our thinking about her logic and her presentation of this information. Misinformation. You only get two options. I'm going to repeat them. She's retarded. She's a liar. I'm taking option two because I've never heard anyone say she's retarded. If anyone thinks she's retarded, please let us know. Poor way. And I mean, this argument, woo, that's about the best I could say. Like, wow, she is really retarded. That's what I mean. Tupac should have played it longer. Not just she is retarded. Again, every last one of you who read this book, say, or even if Whitey got you, pretend literate. And they, I read the first 3 pages. It's kind of thick, and he got good television watching. I ain't gonna sacrifice that much for old Michelle. And again, you could just say that I'm pretend literate. We are pitiful, worthy of great pity. We are retarded. Fine. But if you read this book, you read this, and in this, somewhere in your pecan-sized Negro brain, this computed as logical, especially you'd already read Mr. Fuller's work, you already read Dr. Wells's, you're familiar with their concepts, and you read this, and somehow this, in your little penny-sized cerebellum, this computed as logical, worthy of enormous pity, exponential pity. Not just she is retarded at best. I'm taking option 2. She's a liar. We is retarded, which Fuller already told us, affirming what we know. Poor white victims. She said affirmative action could be experienced as salt in the wound, the metaphor. Yet the advent of affirmative action, suddenly African Americans were leapfrogging over poor and working class whites. Ribbit. Just hopped over. Whoa! See, I said, man, she's retarded. Who but a retarded person gonna even write something like that? You know Michelle is retarded. Now see if they said, well, maybe she's retarded. Don't nobody say she retarded. Y'all had 12 weeks, not one person said, I think Michelle is retarded, Gus. I don't think she's lying. I don't think you should say that. I think she might have some mental challenges. Nobody said that. Leapfrog, ribbit. We leapfrogging. Leapfrogging whites on their way to Harvard and Yale. And again, the Negroes who get to go to Harvard and Yale, the data shows disproportionately either they have one white parent who was born outside the U.S., obesers, or they have one non-white parent born outside the U.S., obese, or they have one white parent, Michelle, obesers. They disproportionately make up the black students who get to go to Harvard. Ribbit, we're leapfrogging them at Yale. Taking jobs and police. Oh, and she brought that up again. She brought that up last week, saying that the black people, because of affirmative action, were taking all the jobs at police departments and the fire departments. And that's another one where I said, oh my God. One, if you are classified as black and you read this text and you thought, wow, that Michelle is so smart. This is an amazing book. Sit down. You are retarded. You thought that ribbit. We hopping over white people, and you think of black people as frogs. That's how you know that. That is a racist trope. That is a racist trope. Black people as frogs. But you think of we hopping over white people. You think that's true? Sit down and shut up. You're a moron. I guess I'm supposed to be more empathetic, but man, it's kind of offensive and repulsive. And maybe even you agree with all the anti-blackness in the book that he has here. Like, whoo, I don't know, but Jesus Christ, it is offensive. Like, people think this is even strive for accuracy. You all think this is accurate? How many black people are on your fire department? I guess retired fire. Yeah, we start right there. How many black people are on the fire department in your town? Hey, our caller, who's with us, sir? Ribbit, did the black people take over the fire department in your town? Hopefully, you've never had a house fire, so you haven't had to see personally in your residence. But to your knowledge, has the fire department in the place where you live been overrun with niggers?
No, I can't say that. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure all of them are classified as white.
No, Ribbit. It can't be all white, Ribbit. It's 2026. Ain't been no leapfrogging at the fire department there?
Not one bit of leapfrogging. I'm pretty sure. I would say I'm about 90% sure that they're all white.
Man, I'm going to hope he being like Michelle Alexander and being fast and loose with the statistics, and then maybe he'll call back next week and find out, actually, you know what, Gus T, it's about 80% Negro at the fire department. Like, see, like Michelle, they be slick with them statistics. Okay. I
don't think I can make that mistake. I've seen a lot of them, and they're all white.
Oh. Okay. What you think about the police department? Has there been any leapfrogging at the police department where you stay?
I think there is one black assistant chief, and then the rest of the department are all white, male or female.
Ribbit. Now that would, the Affirmative Action champions, undisputed. Racist.
But the chief is white. The chief is white. He's just the assistant chief.
Of course. I heard assistant. I didn't get confused on that part. I said white man is in charge. And the white woman. We ain't no patriarchy. White man, white woman in charge. Assistant chief is Negro. Yes. All right. No leapfrog. Maybe he's an anomaly. And again, maybe he might be doing a little Michelle magic with the statistics, but don't see no leapfrogging out there. Same thing. If we got any folks, hey, do you see black people have overtaken your fire department? I know that ain't the case in Seattle, but we don't have a high population of Negroes, so Gus T doesn't really count. She did say Seattle is a racially mixed city. That's what she said. I said that's hogwash too. Seattle is mostly white, so we'll scratch that one. But you look where you stay. The Negroes took over the police department? Okay. And Harvard? What is she talking about? Resentment, frustration, and anger. Oh, wait a minute to go back. That had once been reserved for whites. Civil rights advocates, black people, offered no balm for the wound. Resentment, frustration, and anger expressed by poor and working class whites was chalked up to racism, leading to a subterranean discourse about race and to implicitly racial political appeal. Just when I thought this text could not get worse, oh buddy, this may be the most vile portion of this text. Affirmative action was enacted as a policy by President John Fox Kennedy by executive order. So it's civil rights advocates, aka black people, are the problem? If black people had just treated those poor white folks better, we would not be in this predicament. It is not even historically accurate. White women have benefited the most from affirmative action. There is plenty of evidence that desegregation damaged black children more than whites. All those pictures of child race soldiers hurling racist epithets at their fellow non-white students as they walked to school through a gauntlet of racist white supremacists. We read specifically about one, Elizabeth and Hazel, that is way back in 2012. No, let me make sure. That's 2013. 2013, we read Elizabeth and Hazel. Elizabeth Eckford, Hazel Mallory. Hazel was one of those white people who was out yelling, "Nigger, get out of our school! We'll kill you!" Out yelling at, I think Elizabeth Eckford was like 14, 15, pick one. Right then, and she was alone too. She didn't even have protection, security. She didn't even have other students. She was just by herself with a whole gang of like 50, 100 racists. Hazel Mallory was one. "Nigger will kill you!" But now we got to pause. Do we have balm for the ailing white man who might have been in that mob? Yeah, like, oh, wait a minute, Jerry Jones was in the mob. I know he's not in the poor white, but Jerry Jones was in that mob. He said, I was just curious, because I had never seen nothing like that, and the niggers was going to the school, and I like a spectacle, I can't live. Anyway, but we supposed to, do we have balm for the Jerry Jones? The aggrieved white man. Can we give the white man, like her grandfather who voted for Jesse? See, that's what I mean. Like, man, I would, you lying high yellow, you two-time sucker. You're a two-time lying high yellow wench. You gonna tell me all this, and it should be, oh yeah, we should feel sorry and empathy for my white grandfather who kicked my white mother out the house when she married my nigger father. He voted for Jesse Jackson. She did. I just want to insert. She didn't say he voted for Harold Washington. I don't think he lived in Chicago. I don't know. Maybe he lived in Chicago. I don't know. But she didn't say he voted for Harold Washington. That would have really impressed me, because Jesse Jackson didn't really get on the ticket. You just voted for him in a primary, I would think. That would have really, hey, I voted for Obeezy 2008. I voted for Harold Washington, be mayor of Chicago. I would have still thought he was a racist, but she didn't even say that. But she didn't even tell us that in the book. She left all that, and when she gives that old tacky passage about, hey, white women is victims of racism if they marry a nigger, like my mama, that would have been quick. No, I got to see. You are a two-time lying high yellow wench. And I'd even say that's another one. If you are so lazy to get a book like this and not do any sort of homework or research, oh, this high yellow wench has a white parent. Ooh, that might impact her saying goofy things like this throughout this text. Team Limp Noodle, worthy of great pity. That's us. Continues. Gauntlet of Racists, Elizabeth and Hazel. They got rid of all the black teachers who often had more education than white ones. All this has been discussed at length on the cows in previous broadcasts. Absolutely. See the text, Something Must Be Done, about Prince Edward County. Kristen Green. They closed their schools. Bob Smith. Oh, those are both two great ones. And those are even great illustrations, because they closed schools in Virginia for 5 years as opposed to so-called integrating all of the white children, not just the rich white children, all of the white children. They got to go to school. They made classes and gave out vouchers and things for white people so that they could also attend class. Like, there were some white sacrifice, there were some, but even the poor white children, they got much better than what even wealthy black students, unless you could send your child to another county or to another relative or something like that. And even then, that is not the same as I am white, I'm in town, and they build and establish a private school for us so I can still just be right there in my neighborhood with my family and go to school, as opposed to even the best situation for the black child. You're going to have to go and stay with, Aunt Hattie and Uncle Richard. You're going to have to go, 45 miles down the road and stay with them for the next 5 years and go to school where you don't know anybody. That's the best. For lots of them, it's, well, you can sit around, listen to the radio. Hey, you wanted to watch TV all day. Hey, be careful what you ask for. I was thinking of a different program. There's so many in terms of Acting White, Stuart Buck. That's the program I was thinking of. That's way back, 2010, same year this goofy book was published. Stuart Buck is a white man, but he talks about that exactly, how they got rid of black teachers by the thousands, black educators, when they did so-called integration, and that you didn't even hear that sort of phrasing, that wanting to be intelligent and informed and do well in school, that was not thought of as a white sort of behavior until after so-called integration. 2. Perhaps the time has come to give up the racial bribes and begin an honest conversation about race in America. The audacity, if that isn't the Mayo calling the Miracle Whip white. The topic of the conversation should be how us can come to include all of us. Calling it bribes just puts blame on black people. Taking a bribe is often considered illegal and can send you to jail. Facts. She indicts all black people as criminals, even though white women are the overwhelming beneficiaries of the policy. And just the logic of it all. A bribe? What is the bribe with affirmative action? Like a bribe, again, illegal. And this is supposed to be an illicit forms of persuasion, compelling you to do something. If a black person is so-called benefit from affirmative action, they get to go to Stanford like you, what is the bribe? You have to write a goofy lying book like this? Is that the bribe? She would have to explain it to me. Like, it makes absolutely no sense at all. Lying high yellow wench. 3, and again, she can only execute all of this because she leaves out the fact. Oh yeah, and that's another one. That's why I said this book doesn't warrant scholarly response. Did no one point that out? They had that glaring affirmative action case in the middle between when this book was first published, Amy Fisher. This book was first published in 2010, and its release, it was majorly publicized. White women, biggest affirmative action beneficiaries, and that had been that had been talked about for a long time, like years. Like, no one called her out on that. She didn't feel a need to maybe even redact all of that from the anniversary edition. Let's see. So what is to be demanded in this moment in our nation's racial history? If the answer is more power, more top jobs, more slots in fancy schools for us, in quotes, and even her putting that in quotes, that right there, to me, she does not identify as a black person. It would not have to be in quotes, us. She doesn't put it in quotes when she says we. When she identifies herself with white people, she doesn't put that in quotes. She feels very comfortable with her white mother and her white side of the family that reject her. Black people, yeah, I got to put that in quotes. Us. Yeah, Ashland, yeah, I don't, Leroy we ain't that tight, you know. She said, I didn't quite catch the black brother with the potted plants. Yeah, I didn't want to get too close to him. He already said he didn't stole from his grandmother, so I know he's gonna pick my pockets clean. He's a felon. He told me. See, he checked the box. See, I don't want to get too close. Let me see. That is not even really joking. Let's see. Us, a narrow, racially defined us that excludes many. How about people classified as white stop practicing racism? Hey, she already told you. Hey, everybody has trouble giving up the privilege. That's what she said. 4, we must lay down our racial bribes. We join hands with people of all colors who are not content to wait for change to trickle down and say to those who would stand in our way, accept all of us or none. That is the basic message that Martin Luther King Jr. aimed to deliver through the Poor People's Movement. This is such slop. This is why I think some people said Carter Stewart has a brain. He graduated from Stanford, right? He probably read this and said, same thing we did. Like, what is this slop, man? Get out of here, man. Like, I'm going to lock up some more niggers, man. Shut up. I ain't talking all this slop. Second worst book ever. And even after he got done, hey, make sure you don't put nothing about me in the book. Yeah, I don't want to be in the book. I'm going to lock up more niggers. She over here talking about white victims. This nigger is crazy. But then he probably said too, oh, that's why she got the white. That's right, she high yellow. That's why I married her. She nice and bright and high yellow. Okay, let's see. We must lay down our racial bribes. Join hands with those Klansmen like your white grandpappy. I'll pass on that. I'm going to pass on that one too. And I'm going to pass on joining hands with Michelle Alexander, because I swear for the Lord, boy, get your grubby high yellow mitts off of me. Smack you up. Sorry, you're supposed to be sorry. But see, yeah, we minimize contact. Minimize contact. Like, I don't want to hold hands with you. I don't want to hold hands with your lame children, your lame husband, your grandma, your white grandpa, all of it. Get back to Ashland. 5. More than 40 years later, civil rights advocacy is stuck in a model of advocacy King determined to leave behind. Change in civil rights organizations, like change in society as a whole, will not come easy. Fully committing to a vision of racial justice that includes grassroots bottom-up advocacy on behalf of all of us will require major reconsideration of priorities, staffing, strategies, and messages. It may be that traditional civil rights organizations simply cannot or will not change. Wow, she really has a problem with civil rights organizations. One, I thought she was in the ACLU. Is that a civil rights organization? I'm totally retarded. Maybe it's not. Is she talking about herself? I thought she was the one that said she didn't even understand all this before. Y'all are exaggerating, talking about police planning. Get on out of here and get that dirty potty plant with you. Felon. Box checker. She does blame black people. Blaming a bunch of victims who have no power. She does love to blame black people. It's our fault. We didn't want to criticize Obama. 6, if Martin Luther King Jr. is right that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. A longer version of this statement originated with a sermon given by a white, suspected racist 19th century abolitionist named Theodore Parker. He was a Unitarian minister. See Theodore Parker and the Moral Universe, NPR. 7, James Baldwin told his nephew in a letter published in 1962 in one of the most extraordinary... Can I pause for a second and just say, now again, I'm telling you, I've said consistently, Gus T, this victim's guaranteed qualified, but I'm just pointing out for the record, I have come to a radically different conclusion than like pretty much all the other black people. One, you could just start with, I said, hey, we need to leave that, stop saying all white people are, stop saying not all white people are racist. We need to leave that alone. Is not logical, not accurate. Michelle's mama ain't no racist. Get out of here. Shut up. Sit down. You too, Michelle. Shut up. Sit down. But I just do not think the way that... So when we finished Shar Adams, black owned, the black bookstore owners, she compiled the list. They said this is one of the top 10 most important books black people need to read. I say if it was not for 1,000 pages of FBI files, this would be the worst book I've ever read. Ain't no in-betweens on that one. It ain't no, well, I can see where she might be a little bit of a high yellow wench. But also it's one of the best books you need to read. No, this ain't no either or, ain't no middle ground on this. This is pretty dichotomous here. Either she is a lying high yellow wench, maybe retarded, or this is an amazing book, and Gus is the retarded one. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's one or the other. Continuing, James Baldwin told his nephew, 1962, in one of the most extraordinary books ever written, The Fire Next Time, I Disagree. With great passion and searing conviction, Baldwin had this to say to his younger nephew: this is the crime of which I accuse my country and my countrymen, for which neither I nor time nor history will ever forgive them, that they have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and do not know it. And see, they're ignorant. They're ignorant. They're ignorant. They're ignorant. They're ignorant. They're ignorant. That's what, this is why I say, when you open your mouth to say James Baldwin, I'm already, get out of here. Get out of here. It's got all that anti-sex connected to it too. Like, you are not serious about solving this problem. You're mentioning a name that white people said, oh yeah, James Baldwin, safe. You're not trying to be universal man. You're a universal woman. You're just trying to get up here and waste time. You might say racism, but you're not trying to solve this. But you're not serious about replacing white supremacy with justice. I don't want to hear anything else about James Baldwin. I don't want to hear anything else about James Baldwin. That right there, when I hear someone, oh, okay, they're not serious. Next, move. No disrespect to James Baldwin, but we're done. I've already seen that every time almost someone brings up James Baldwin. It's total nonsense like this. White people are ignorant and what? Get out of here. Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Keep it moving. Innocent for which constitutes a crime. Innocent? Question mark. VGQ. Is Mr. Baldwin implying that white people are innocent? Ignorant? I'm not sure what he means. Me either. And I don't care. I'm done with JB. I have not read Dorothy Roberts' latest work, but to me, this is the worst text I have read in the book club. I am glad the new Jim Crow was in the book club, and glad I am done. Me too. Oh my goodness. It is easy if it was not for those 1,000 pages of FBI files. It would be the at least tied. And again, if I ever find out there's some sort of connection and agent, informant, on the staff, anything like that, we will revisit, and there we might have a tie or a reordering or whatever the case may be. So I do reserve the right to revisit if we get new information. But as it stands now, second worst book all time, easily could be number one. And the only reason it is not, 1,000 plus pages of FBI files and Dorothy Roberts. Let's see. Make sure we don't miss *61 if anybody has a comment they need to get in before we wrap up. I'll get in our last email and get in my thoughts as well. Let's see. Last email. Hi, Gus, Cal's audience. I'm also glad this book has come to an end. I hadn't read it before, and I'm glad I didn't spend any money on the book or receive a free copy. I previously stated that Mrs. Alexander doesn't like black people. Now, that's interesting because generally we don't have like consensus around something like that, but to have many people read this book and kind of come to the same assessment, like, wow, it doesn't seem like she likes black people very much. White parent. Which I stand by, but that was the thought I really wanted to convey. You hit the nail on the head when you said she identifies with white people. She clearly has a disdain for black people, which she told us. She dismissed any black person that claimed to be victims of racism when she apparently worked in organizations aimed at tackling racism. I thought these were civil rights organizations, the group she keeps criticizing, and the ACLU and all. I am in no doubt that there are more victims of her disdain than the young man with the dirty plant whom she victimized. It's also why her children dislike black people. Her book is filled with slogans like the title, New Jim Crow, or Trickle Down Racial Justice. We heard that one this week. That she uses to get the 2010 equivalent of a viral moment. Coin a phrase, repeat it, build a narrative around it, let it circulate. Her statements are designed to confuse readers. Her ideas are logical theories that are underpinned with evidence, which is clearly not the case. I would say she doesn't, so many times she just gives us these sweeping generalizations with no data, no evidence, no nothing. Like, forget all the emotional James Baldwin and Dr. King quotes. Like, where did you get data that white people were out of the business of practicing racism in the 80s? Like, where did you get that? Where did you even get data that black people were not going to criticize Barack Obama because he's black? Like, what? Like, I don't. Anyway, continuing. But I do, the slogans, I do think that's true because so many people use New Jim Crow. That's almost like hashtag new hook, New Jim Crow, New Jim Crow, New Jim Crow. I've been saying we need to stop saying Jim Crow, period, when we're talking about the system of white supremacy from like 20th century in the U.S., much less New Jim. Like, come on, man. What on earth is trickle down justice? She's drawing from the theory of trickle-down economics, i.e. that politics benefiting the wealthy, investors, and large corporations will eventually benefit everyone else because prosperity at the top trickles down through the economy. Mrs. Alexander's analogy is another thinly disguised attempt at blaming black people for racism. It implies that black advancement itself should somehow fix racism, as if the behavior or success of black people determines whether white people stop discriminating. The civil rights movement was never about creating elite black success. It was about dismantling racist structures. The failure lies in white institutions, not in whether black wealth trickles down. It seems reasonable to assume that Obama, who knows a little something about poverty and temptations of drugs, would have a there but the grace of God go I attitude about the millions of African and Latina men imprisoned for drug offenses comparable to his own or saddled for life with felony records. Here she's writing and thinking like a white woman about a black man with a white parent and black people in general. But before we kick back, I think she's talking to black people here. That's an interesting we, because she doesn't have we in quotes here. Before we kick back, relax and wait for racial justice to trickle down. Consider this: Obama chose Joe Biden, one of the Senate's most strident drug warriors, as his vice president. I wonder if her perspective on this is the same in 2026, knowing that Hunter Biden and therefore Joe Biden are the ones with first-hand knowledge on drug taking. Facts. That ain't the Mayo calling the Miracle Whip white. Facts. Much obliged for the commentary. Make sure I didn't miss any other folks that have a hand, and then I'll get some of my closing thoughts before we get ready
Tonight,
to
the search
wrap it up.
continues for the man police.
Put that back over there. Get some of my closing thoughts before we get ready to wrap it up. This has been one of the least enjoyable books. I will say, I did read the whole book. I did not, go to sleep, throw off my headset, press mute or anything like that. I took highlights. I researched. I went to get audio segments, sound clips, all of that. Just because I do not necessarily enjoy a book, or even if it's a book that I think is the worst I've ever read, I don't stop reading. I do generally continue. Like, I did read all of the Mixed Marriage Project, every page, cover to cover, highlighted as well, even though that wasn't even, I had no intention of inviting her as a guest on the program, or even though I did end up going to question her in person, but I had no intention of, let's read that on the program. That was just a personal read. I still read the whole thing. We need more counter-racist scholars. I'm not reading for entertainment. I'm not reading for pleasure. I'm reading as a serious study. Even if I have complete disdain for this book, I am working my brain computer. I am getting smarter by using my brain to deconstruct the nonsense and lies of Michelle Alexander, especially because this is a book that's so popular. So many people refer to this book, and still, even this week, just days ago, I was posting my contempt for this text, and someone, a black person, listener, investor, said, oh man, literally, just today, somebody said, girl, you need to read this book. You want to understand racism? New Jim Crow. At the same time, I was saying, this is the second worst book I've ever read. She said the same thing I did. Dang, ain't no middle ground there. She said, this is one of the best books ever. Gus T said, this is one of the worst I've ever read. Which is it? We need to stretch our brain computing. I'm saying the evidence is so self-evident. How in the world do you have so many black people? You all can check for yourself. How many black people have you heard jump up and down and celebrate about this book? Black people who say, oh yeah, I read Neely Fuller Jr. I interviewed Neely Fuller Jr. I read Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. I interviewed Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And on and on and on. I'm smart about racism. Michelle, the black bookstore owner said, this book is amazing. Now, again, that's when I have to really step back. Now, really, the black bookstore owners read the same book we just finished. Empathy for White Men. That's not enough to get you thrown off of, we're going to compile a top 10 for all time's sake book list based on what black bookstore sellers think. How does Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow get anywhere close to that list? If we were doing, like, real talk, like if we were doing a best 5,000 books, Shell is not on the list. If we were doing a best 1,000,000 books, Shell is not on the list. We would have to do the worst books, the books that you think are a total piece of crap. Then, okay, Bing, she gonna be quick. She probably be second book I mentioned. Number one, Michelle Alexander, Dorothy Roberts, Mixed Marriage Project, that's number one. Then Michelle Alexander, New Jim Crow. We get to Case and Lucky. We'll get to that if we have time. They say, what are the worst books ever written to totally confuse non-white people's understanding of racism, white supremacy? Mixed Marriage Project, New Jim Crow. You think these books were written to deliberately confuse black people? Yep. I think there are many books that are written racist. They may be task assigned authors, white and non-white. We want you to write this specifically to confuse non-white people. They might even deliver. Hey, when was Dorothy Roberts' book released? Mixed Marriage Project I'm talking about. When was that book published? I mean, time of year. You saying that that's what they do? They write books to deliver the, yeah, especially, and apparently I think it's especially effective because we don't read. So when you get people that have a limp noodle, weak brain computer, semi-literate, non-literate, pretend literate, illiterate, when you get that, it's very easy to trick those people. They don't really read very much anyway, so they go in, read 2 pages, and then my brain hurt. I don't want to read. And Michelle, and even the person who wrote in and said she got all these catchphrases, most of these chapters, or a number of them, they're kind of short. Like it's broken up. It's got all these little sub-chapters in it. If you don't read a whole lot, that might be helpful. Because you got all those little quick, Bill Cosby and his respectability and the sagging pants niggers, and then you're on to the next little subset. So if you don't like my head hurt, I want to go watch Netflix. Hey, sometimes you could read like 2 pages and then it's on to the next little subsection. Some of them are slightly longer, but a lot of them are really short. So you could just kind of go on through and it's got this little catchy and phrases. All right. It ain't got nothing about no Negro testicles, so it ain't got nothing that would gross you out too bad like medical apartheid. Oh my God, I can't believe they did what? Delectable Negro type. It's nothing really like that. I go, okay, I'm still going to go watch the television. But okay, yeah, that Michelle, yeah, she high yellow too. Yeah. Worthy of great pity, we are again Team Limp Noodle. Notes for this week. I pulled up the good book, the bad book. Oh, Jesus. This is such an awful book, man. Let's see, going back to the Obama Peril. That's what we picked up at this week. There we go. Okay. She says, She said that Bill Clinton's decision to fly back to Arkansas during 1992 presidential campaign to oversee the execution of a mentally retarded black person. Again, I wonder if a mentally retarded black person authored this book. Or is she just lying? Let's see. She says, the man Obama tapped to lead the U.S. Department of Justice, the agency that launched and continues to oversee the federal war on drugs, is an African-American former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia who sought to ratchet up the drug war in Washington, D.C., and fought the majority black D.C. City Council in an effort to impose harsh mandatory minimums for marijuana possession. I said, is she talking about Eric Holder? Why don't she just say Eric Holder? Okay. That's interesting. And I don't think she corrected that. Like, even at the time, like, I think Eric Holder, he's got some name recognition. Certainly now. But, whatever. Maybe even a tad bit more disdain for black people. And even now, recreational cannabis is legal in Washington, D.C., if that means anything, because they still have the contradiction between the federal law and the local law. Let's see. She says the unique and concerning situation racial justice advocates now face is that the very people who are most oppressed by the current caste system, African Americans, may be the least likely to want to change it now that a black family is living in the White House. If Obama were white, there would be no hesitation to remind him of his youthful drug use when arguing. Again, I just didn't see any evidence at any time that black people hesitated in criticizing President Obama, even during the campaign before he got in the White House. I remember that candidate Obama was subject to quite a bit of scrutiny from black people who criticized him. I remember they have audio clips of black people yelling out from the audience. He was doing a speech, I believe it might have been in Florida, and they were yelling out, criticizing him for what he said or did not say about the Jenna 6 situation, which Michelle wrote about in this book. And he responded, I did talk about that situation. I did say something. If you don't agree with what I said or don't like what I said, you can run for office yourself. And the crowd went crazy for that one, which is true. That's a great response. Let's see. She says, could it be that many African Americans would actually prefer to ignore racial issues during Obama's presidency to help ensure him smooth sailing in a triumphant presidency, no matter how bad things are for African Americans in the meantime? Now, again, I'm saying you had a chance to revise all this. Did anybody see any evidence that this was the case? That black people said, hey, we don't want to get upset and rowdy about no Trayvon Martin. We don't want to get upset and rowdy about no Michael Brown Jr. We don't want to get upset and rowdy about no Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, Alton Sterling. We don't want to get all riled up about all that. Trayvon, we don't want to get all riled up all that. And further, we don't care if Obama says anything about that. We don't care if Obama says anything about Michael Brown Jr. We don't care. We just want Brother Obama to have easy 2 terms. We don't want to mess nothing up. Did you hear anything like that? And again, I'm saying, number one, this book was published so early. Where are you even getting? Ain't no footnotes. Where are you getting this from? I'm looking at it right now. None of this is footnoted. Where are you getting this from? And once his presidency ends, so then you've seen, oh, okay, Dr. Cornell and these folks, they done went to town on Obama, and you know, kind of, when you even say the mumbling word, and ain't no, oh, okay, black people, they were that. Nope, she gonna just let all that stand. That anti-blackness, contempt for black people. She says, the absence of thoroughgoing structural critique of the prevailing racial order explains why so many civil rights advocates responded to Barack Obama's election with glee, combined with hasty reminders that we still have a long way to go. The predictable response from the casual observer is, well, how much further? A black man was just elected president with a white parent. How much further do black people want to go? If a black person can be elected president, can't a black person do just about anything now? Now, again, this is, in my view, either she's retarded or lying. The fact that he has a white parent, I cannot overstate that. You even had Senator Harry Reid talked about that. Hey, light complexion, got that light, high yellow line white, wench that we're listening to, got that white parent, speaks well, articulate, doesn't sound like the black people she quoted in this book. If he was darker, looked like, I don't know, Flavor Flav, maybe not. Look like Jesse Owens. Come on. Let's see. In the last bit, she says, the way she quotes Malcolm X to then flip that to white men have suffered, like, oh my God, you are so repulsive. Let's see. I'm not really sure what exactly are you tasking Thurgood Marshall with doing exactly. What exactly? He didn't do this with regards to white men circa 1955. This is what he should have been doing. This is the bomb he should have offered to white men that would have made our transition away from the system of white supremacy racism more effective, more efficient. I didn't hear that. I just heard a bunch of BS, really, and lies. What exactly? Let's see. She blames some of this. It seemed like she's saying that on illiterate white men, the fact that they couldn't read, maybe that's why they were behaving in this manner. How many black people were illiterate? Like, come on. Is that why your grandfather behaved the way he did? He was illiterate? White grandfather I'm talking about? She says, in retrospect, it seems clear that nothing could have been more important in the 1970s and 1980s than finding a way to create a durable, interracial, bottom-up coalition for the social and economic justice to ensure that another caste system did not emerge from the ashes of Jim Crow. Now, again, we never had an end to the system of white supremacy racism. That never happened. Schools never even really so-called integrated. But she's saying, hey, we can't let this new Jim Crow. What are you even talking about? Priority should have been given to figuring out some way for poor and working class whites to feel as though they had a stake, some tangible interest in the nascent integrated racial order. What? And again, Fuller, integrated, that term should not be used. What the F are you even talking about? And the priority should have been poor and working class whites. We have got a way to pull them. Now, again, I thought a lot of that had already been done. And again, she doesn't include the Black Panther Party. We already tried that. She leaves the Poor People's Campaign. All of this had already been attempted. Even if you want to go back to North Carolina and fusion politics, all of this has already been attempted repeatedly. Whites bail every time. I went to the bot on that one, and he said this is why she does not mention Derek Bell's work when she goes to fuss at black people about trying to make some sort of multi-racial alliance. It totally ignored. That's why I said this book was deliberately written to confound black people's understanding of what it means to be classified as white. She says, I'm going to get to the part that I read to the bot about this chunk right here, but I also shared a few others with the bot. These are some of the responses. It said, look at her rhetorical questions. Have we communicated the message that the best path, perhaps the only path to the promised land, is infiltrating elite institutions and seizing power at the top? This is exactly what she did. She used her biracial passport, one white parent, to glide straight into Vanderbilt and Stanford Law, securing a high-paying academic gatekeeper position at the top of the pre-existing structure. The Hustler, she writes a paragraph trashing the trickle-down model of racial justice, while she is simultaneously on a national corporate foundation funded media tour collecting applause from wealthy white liberals. She critiques the very elite privilege she used to manufacture her own career as a corporate race manager. We and the emission of state terror by grouping the entire black community, so-called, into a single uniform collective. She hides the deep class divides between the elite white identified academics who manage the non-profit grant money and the mudsills of the working class who fill the cells. She blames black voters for letting the lawyers take over, completely erasing the physical violence of the state. As you have proven over these 12 weeks, she can spend pages analyzing the psychological passivity of black voters under Obama, but she refuses to write one mumbling word about John Burge's decades-long campaign of racist torture and genital mutilation that was actually manufacturing the felon statistics on Chicago's West Side. And this is the white male. Let's see. The white man, it turns out, has suffered too. The final pages of the book dedicated to exposing a system that systematically targets cages and structurally executes black families. She goes out of her way to build an explicit defense mechanism for white suffering. Let's see. She argues that poor and working class whites were forced to bear the burden of desegregation, trying to equate their desire for upward mobility with the generational terror inflicted on black children. The structural reality, Derek Bell's theory of structural racism, notes that the system treats whiteness as property. Working class white people fiercely resisted desegregation, not because they were simply desperate for education, but because they were actively fighting to preserve their elevated legal and social status over black people. To frame white massive resistance, school boycotts, and racial violence as a sad social adjustment burden completely sanitizes the violent white supremacist actions of the foot soldiers on the ground. The we and the illusion of the elite minority. She tries to use the 1950 census data to argue that because only a tiny minority of whites were affluent, the rest were practically in the same boat as urban black people. The mathematical hustle. This is an absolute mathematical lie. A semi-literate white person in the 1950s South still possessed the full protection and property value of their skin color. They could vote. Really, you could stop right there. They could walk into any establishment. They faced no threat of state-sanctioned lynching for looking a white person in the eye, and they were never targeted by police torture rings like John Burge's. That's a question I want to ask on Monday. So, since white people are victims of racism, did John Burge, any of his henchmen, did they grab any white people and put the electrical prods on their testicles and sodomize them? And what you gonna say you did it? Get his penis. Get his penis. Yeah, your white behind is gonna fry. Did they do that? Because I ain't read nothing about it. I'm telling you, children, I am closing on the conclusion of the book for Monday too. I have not read one example of this happening, and this is a book written by a white dude. Let's see. Wait, one more. The section that I just read. The timeline she invents. Wait a minute. Priority should have been given to figure out some way for poor and working class whites to feel as though they had a stake. She is completely divorcing herself from reality. Look at the timeline she invents, lies. She claims that in the 1970s and 1980s, the primary failure wasn't the deliberate execution of black communities by state-sanctioned police forces, but rather that black civil rights lawyers didn't work hard enough to give poor white people an elementary framework for integration. She is literally blaming the victims of centuries of chattel slavery and Jim Crow terror for not designing an educational pamphlet to soothe the feelings of their oppressors. It suggests that if black lawyers had just been better marketers, poor white people wouldn't have participated in massive resistance, firebombed integration buses, or joined local police forces to deploy carceral dragnets. Derek Bell's direct takedown of the Guinevere Alexander thesis. You already have the ultimate intellectual counterweapon for this because you know Derek Bell's theory of structural racism inside and out. Lonnie Guinier and Michelle Alexander argue that you can build a durable interracial bottom-up coalition if you just find a way to make poor white people feel included. Derek Bell completely obliterated this fantasy lie with the principle of interest convergence. He proved that white supremacy functions by treating whiteness as a form of property. The system deliberately structures society so that even the poorest, most illiterate white citizen receives an automatic social and legal premium just for being white. They will never form a bottom-up coalition with black people to surrender that premium, because doing so destroys their only structural asset. Alexander and Guinier are selling a kumbaya fairy tale lie that ignores the foundational mechanics of the machine. And again, this is a lie on so many levels, because it's not like this hasn't been like no black person ever thought, hey, let's see if we can get some of these poor white people. You all are mistreated and you all letting get money like that. And the powerful white people, the big wheelers, they don't even treat y'all right. We can link together and we maybe get 5 minutes. Maybe if they don't try to lynch us immediately, maybe we get 5 minutes into it and say, you know what? That's all right, niggas. I'm going to stick with this white supremacy thing. It's been, yeah, I'm good, niggas. Like that's just happened over and over and over. And she ignores all of that. Like, really? We ain't never tried that, you lying? How about this? Go form a multiracial coalition with your white grandpapa. How about that? Lying, high yellow wench. Let's see. She says, inevitably, a new system of racialized social control will emerge, one that we cannot foresee, just as the current system of mass incarceration was not predicted by anyone 30 years ago. You lying, high yellow wench. Yes, it was. Like, white people planned all of this out at least 30, 40, 50 years ago. They already planned. We gonna lock them niggers up. Fuller, even that's why I included that audio. Fuller, the plan is we are going to burst the prisons with them dark folks. Leroy ain't got a chance. Maybe we, black people, we didn't see that was going to be the plan, but someone did. They were building and investing in prisons a long time ago. Let's see. Oh, it was so repulsive. The whole ending of this with James Baldwin is, oh, Jesus Christ. And then we get right back to ignorant and we're going to love them. And oh, it is so repulsive. And this is so old. People have quoted this before. You're just quoting the same crap from, see, this is the criticism that I had of that book list. Because James Baldwin was on that list too. You're just going to go back and rehash the same rhetoric and lies and emotionality from like 60 years ago. All of this stuff did not solve white supremacy racism then, and it did not advance our understanding of what it means to be classified as white. It would have been better. How about you end this book with what your grandfather said to your mom? Get the hell out of here. If you're going to be, you going to have that nigger's testicles in bed with you, then you can get on out of my house. Laying down with a nigger. End the book that way, man. What it mean to be white. What it mean to be white. Cost me my grandparents. What it mean to be white. And then she could have gave a jab to IBM for her black dad. That would have been a cool way to end the book. Talk about how maybe IBM participate in mass incarceration. She didn't do that. Give us some crap with James Baldwin. Lion, high, yellow, wench. And double dipping. Pretend like she cares about. I have no idea who read this book and got the impression Michelle Alexander has a sincere concern for black males. How in God's name would you come to that conclusion? Even if I hadn't heard the story about the black dude with the dirty potted plant, I still would not have thought, oh man, Michelle, she loves her some black dudes. Woo-wee. Man, she is the hardest caper for the black dude in the world. Boy, Michelle love her some black. I don't think that at all. Whew. Anyway, I feel a little bit nauseous in my tummy. To be honest, this book was so bad, so awful. Oof. We have to read something, hopefully, much better to kind of cleanse my palate from all of this, because it was such a revolting experience. But new book coming to the cows next Friday. New book, and it will be something hopefully much, much better. When I say better, more accurate, more constructive, something that maybe accurate, constructive, and then too maybe we can actually enjoy as we read and strengthen our brain computer. But praise the Lord, done with Michelle Alexander, and I do mean that. This is open invitation forever. You feel the need to cape for Michelle or the people who read this book and thought it was great, feel free anytime. I'm not going to forget Michelle. I might have to go back and refresh on a note or two, but I'll have my highlights and be ready to roll. We just get to the title. So you think the system of white supremacy is colorblind. You think Michelle Alexander's white mother is a victim of racism. You think Thurgood Marshall, he didn't do enough to reach out to the jaded, wounded white male victims. Kenneth Clark, he should have done a study on white men to see how integration was impacting their white self-respect. Maybe that's what should have happened. You are a two-time sucker, a two-time lyin, high yellow wench, you and two of your best white friends, and you have the second worst book of all time. Pending if I find any FBI files or anything else incriminating. We'll be here tomorrow, counter-racist review for the week. And again, hey, kind of before we transition to a new book, John Burge was omitted. We're going to compensate for that on Monday. You're going to write a chapter for that alone. We can forget everything. And I mean, that's like a 2-ton silo to forget of slop and lies. But we can forget everything else. You're going to call yourself a Chicago native. Say you wrote a subsection on Chicago and racism, and you can't say John Burge. You say, I care about me some black dudes. I married me a black dude. I love me some black dudes. You can't say John Burge's name? Okay. Monday, John Burge, System of White Supremacy, Racism, Negro Testicles. Y'all want me to do the count again? Let me see if I can do it. If I can get that sucker right quick here. Oh, I was going to do it two ways. I was going to see if I can do it two ways. Let me get one. She talked about the victims of white male victims. Let's give a passage. This is from the book on Monday where he talks about the white male victims. Monday guests say, for example, investigating a grocery store robbery, which culprits took a police officer hostage in 1979, officers allegedly struck a black suspect over the head with a flashlight, shocked him on the chest and genitals with what they called a nigger box, and claimed God had diarrhea when he created you MFers. Even assuming that officers acted with good intention of cleaning up the streets, their racist behavior at best distorted justice and fractured relationships with black communities, so-called. I guess they don't really have nothing about white victims, because I ain't really read no passage where it said that the white genitals and the white penis and the white rectum, or even white people, period, were beaten up, called names, harassed, smacked around. None of the above, really. But, hey, maybe I got more pages, so maybe I ain't read that part yet. Let me give you the word count. See, Michelle, I see. Michelle didn't want to talk about none of this. You see, the word count for the book we're going to talk about on Monday. You know how I do the word count. I go through it. How many times is this word in? How many times? Book for Monday. The word genitals is in that book 8 times. You already know that means ain't nary one of them 8 mentions about no white genitals. Not one. The word penis is in the book 2 times. So far, no white penis mentioned. The word testicles is in the book 3 times. So far, the word testicles, not about no white testicles. The word groin, 4 times. Only Negro groins. Did I say testicles? 3 times. Groin, 4. My privates, once. And the crude nuts, once. Not talking about planters or honey roasted. That, I think, might be a real, and they almost said what I said, because it's almost every page. They grabbed me and they took my pants down to my ankles and they said, "Nigga, you gonna confess?" We got the, they said, we gonna have some. They didn't say, "Let me get my bifocals because I can't see. Can you give me my glasses? I got my contacts because I can't even see his testicles to do my shotgun." They didn't say that. They said, "We got the box. It's fun time." Remember I played the video. It's fun time. It's fun time. We're going to have some fun. We're going to do what's fun. I'm going to take this Negro's pants down, and I'm going to torture your genitals. Dr. Welsing, I said every page. I said, "That's Dr. Welsing." I said, "That's Dr. Welsing." I said, "That's Dr. Welsing." I'm going to take his pants down. You going to say you did it. You going to say, "I didn't do it." "Yes, you did. I'm going to crush your penis." Michelle didn't want no parts of that, you lying high yellow wench. That's Monday, though. We're going to make up and we're going to compensate. Every time she didn't want to mention John Burge, we're going to talk about John Burge accurately. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And even make sure John Burge and them, they hopped on the white testicles too. PSA for the weekend. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. Oh, I got the paper in front of me. I put the article from, what paper is that? I have to blow up so I can get in tight. Let's see. Is this Chicago Times? It's like Chicago Sun Times. There we go. Chicago Sun Times from 2011. We say, "He laughed while he was torturing me." Say, "He tried to kill me. Burge looked like he was enjoying himself. He laughed while he was torturing me." Heard that over and over and over and over. Laughed. Ha 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 ha. Love it. Love it. That's fun. That's fun. What do it mean to be? And this book even talks about the aggrieved white men, because that's the sentiment that led to this. We mad? How you gonna make an interracial coalition? The people that's mad, I'm out looking to castrate black boys. I was thinking we could form a multiracial coalition and solve some of our problems together, but I kind of wanted to keep my privates. Man, I'll beat me. Whoa, you lying high. Monday. New book next week. Lion High Yellow Wench. Anybody that thought this book was great, I guess that's for the black bookstore owners. Anybody. My mom. Even perpetuity. Michelle Alexander's children, grandchildren, Carter Stewart's mother, brother, daughter, uncle, cousins, you. Anybody. Forever. This book is great. It's constructive. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Calling her retarded, high yellow wench. You're probably retarded too. You probably do not understand racism. What else can I conclude? You think her mom is a victim of racism? We'll be here tomorrow. Counter-Racist Weekly Review. Second worst book I've ever read. And deliberately written to confuse black people. PSA, sobriety would be better. Hey, you do not want get no sobriety checkpoint and have old John Burge and his cousins wrestle you up. Hey, you shouldn't have been driving drunk. It's fun time. We're going to pull your pants down. You do not want that for your 4th of July memory. You talk about fireworks. It has been time. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. You know, one of the odd things about all that genital mutilation in Chicago, the point he seemed to say is that this was not a problem of ignorance because they kind of bragged about. I just told you, he loved it. It's fun time. It's fun time. They got a reputation. It seems some of these folks, it seems they got promoted for torturing, sodomizing, and mutilating black male genitals. I didn't get the impression that this was a problem of ignorance or vision. John Burge doesn't wear glasses that I've seen. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in, you two-time high yellow wench.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.